My father was an angry man growing up. My father was raging growing up. The household I was in was chaos. But don't forget them dark times. You've been using benzodiazepam, you've been using methadone to mazepam, and your street, you can't just stop them kind of drugs like that.
What was you using at that stage?
No, I'd used heroin. I'd smoked £10 worth of gear with a few other people and just kind of dismissed all that.
What was your first drug you took?
Amphetamine. My mother fell into a coma, bless her. My mother went for heart surgery and she fell into a coma whilst I was in the prison in Cyprus. I was in the toilet injecting. I've come out and I've just come out to a melee of violence. It was kicked off. The mixed race guy, I can't remember his name, he got stabbed about 18 times by some of the TCE guys. I was petrified to go back to Plymouth after the prison stint then. I'm coming back to Plymouth knowing all this has gone on. These guys are in with the TCE. They're in with the crew that are taxing everyone around all the raves. They're in with the football hooligans. They're in with the boys that I know are older, that I'm feared. You don't mess around with these guys. Recovery was a safe haven for addicts. Define recovery in the city of Plymouth. And all this was going on in an area that I'd used in, that I grew up in, making them real safe spaces, stage 1 houses for people to come in to detox in, do you know what I mean? And I set up like an empire of recovery in the city of Plymouth.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level podcast, where we have deep conversations which will help and promote deep self-development in whoever's watching this and what we've learned from the experiences that we've gone through and the hard-earned wisdom we've learned. So me and my guests share our deep insight and practical exercises that have helped us and in turn will help you. Today, I am with Lee. Thank you for coming, Lee.
Yes, welcome guys, welcome.
God bless you. Can you share with the audience what you do now?
As little as possible, guys, these days. Yeah. No, I live and breathe, a way of life and recovery. I kind of believe in sacrificing oneself to help others a lot of the time. Through giving we kind of receive in more ways than one. But I've devoted my life to helping many others along the road of recovery.
Yes. Okay, so let's go right back to your upbringing.
Are you sure?
Yes, please.
Are you sure
you
want to be talking about this stuff?
Let's go real deep. Let's unload. Let's treat it like this is the last conversation we're ever going to have.
Yeah.
How about that?
Cool, guys. But I'll pre-warn you, I can talk for England.
Let's do it.
But, so I guess, a good place to start is at the beginning. It was, and childhood, do you know what I mean? Really paints a picture for how, one's life kind of, pans out, I believe. A lot of that is the framework. Do you know what I mean? And, for me, I grew up in a place called Plymouth, bottom part of the UK. Most people know Plymouth, very historical town. It's where the Pilgrim Fathers set off, and I grew up in a place called Stonehouse, St. Peter's Ward. A bit like care in the community when I was a child. Do you know what I mean? Because all the kind of madness was there, and I'm the eldest of 5 children. I grew up to a father called Raymond, Raging Ray, and a dearly blessed woman called Janet, who had the kindest heart and soul that you could kind of want really from a mother, growing up. But it was very dysfunctional. I'm the eldest of 5 children, and kind of like I'm 52 now, and I grew up in like the most deprived area of the city really at the time. Do you know what I mean? It has been noted to be one of the most deprived, areas in the UK at points. And I guess that's a lot to do with, do you know what I mean? Certain hierarchy, gaining and securing huge funds to keep it a very deprived area over the years. Do you know what I mean? Because, unfortunately, these deprived areas, they get lots of money pumped into them. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
And that can either get kept hush-hush or can be spent on the real deal. Unfortunately, I believe St. Peter's Ward, it wasn't spent. Do you know what I mean? As it should. And, you know, a lot of people missed out, you know.
Share with me why your dad was called Raging Ray.
It was just, you know, my father was an angry man growing up. You know, he kind of like, you know, I've got to learn of my father's history, but you know, my father grew up in a very dysfunctional family. He never met his father. He never knew who his father was. You know, he never, you know, my gran, she was like, you know, Betty, God rest her soul. You know, she died of alcoholism. She was a chronic alcoholic. She was a working lady, a lady of the night back in the day. You know, my father's brother was put in Dr. Bernardo's when he was a child, never to be seen again. This is a bit of a weird story around that one, which I can come to later on. You know, some connection that he made when I was living like 100 yards, you know, from his biological brother in Bristol in my early recovery. Weird, but I'll tell you a bit about that later. And sad thing was, he located him around the corner from where I was living, up in White Ladies Road in Clifton. And so my father went up there because Dr. Bernardo had got hold of him, and I was living around the corner in a dry house, and he bloody passed away in a construction industry accident. Do you know what I mean? Some years previous. So even though they kind of, do you know what I mean? He got to connect, he kind of didn't. Do you know what I mean? All them years later.
With his father?
Yeah, no, that was his brother. That was his brother
okay.
that he never seen since a child. So yeah, my father was raging growing up. Do you know what I mean? And why wouldn't you be raging growing up? Do you know what I mean? With no real intervention and the dysfunction that's you're kind of, you know, prone to growing up in that environment. You know, and you know, my father never liked the churches. Do you know what I mean? He kind of despised authority. He was like a one-man mission, really. Do you know what I mean? To take on the world, and you know, he probably experienced so much trauma that I would never know about, that he stuck to his grave. Do you know what I mean? That kind of, you know, fueled all that stuff.
Yeah.
And but with that, you know, comes a lot of dysfunction when stuff like that is not treated right. Do you know what I mean? And you know, you haven't healed from the trauma of all that stuff. You know, that's going to be placed in the family unit that you're kind of in. Do you know what I mean? And unfortunately, for me, being the eldest child, and more my sister Julie at the time, because I've got younger brothers and sisters who didn't really experience a great deal of that stuff, because you know, as they get older, they have the calming effect. And you know, but there was lots of dysfunction. You know, it was a lot of kind of like, you know, you witness a lot of stuff children shouldn't witness. You know, I was exposed to a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have been exposed to. You know, I was pretty much just left to a free rein as a child. Do you know what I mean? To do as I please, you know.
At what age can you remember
well,
that?
there was more or less as soon as I could walk.
Yeah.
More or less as soon as I could walk. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of, you know, it was game on. You know, I grew up on eggshells in the house. Do you know what I mean? I kind of grew up very, very fear-based. Very fear-based.
So when you was left on your own, what was your parents doing then?
Well, to be fair, it was pretty much like it for all the kids in the area. Because of the area we lived in, you know, it was run down. We were moneyless, potless. You know, I was kind of out, you know, doing what kids do, hanging around with older kids, getting up to all kinds of problems. You know, it was more or less as soon as I was, you know, a nipper walking, I was out thieving. You know, I kind of like learned to fix the internal early on with outside stuff. You know, money became a huge incentive to live when I was a kid because we had none. You know, I used to always look after my mother. My mother, she was such a caring soul, but she had such a dog's life living with my father. Horrific at times, you know, and I could never understand why she couldn't find the strength to leave. But back in the day, you know, them generations of people, they just put up with it, you know, sad to say. And, you know, the household I was in was chaos. I didn't want to be there. You know, it had its good points, don't get me wrong. You know, we used to have some lovely day trips at times. My mother would take in a lot of other kids who were kind of problematic and also from dysfunctional families, and they would come along on day trips with us. But behind closed doors, it was another matter. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's like, oh, it was like, yeah, it was a kind of crooked kind of setup, to say the least. But there was a lot of love from my mother. Do you know what I mean? You know, my father was unable to show all that stuff due to his own history, I guess, you know, and he would only portray what he's been given to him. And, you know, we come to understand this stuff as we get older. And, you know, we, like I said, you know, I was poverty stricken. We were kind of, low on the road around financial stuff. I remember sharing a tin bath. I was christened in the sink with Guinness. Do you know what I mean? I used to be living out bloody, we used to go out, my man used to be at Chelsea Meadows every night while I was at school, scrannying, do you know what I mean? Getting the scrap metal, getting whatever, that he could make a buck from. And, I'd be out there kind of with him, and, we'd be around the skips in the town, getting all the out of date kind of food out of the skip, do you know what I mean? And, to survive. And you could do all that back in the day. And, sounds kind of gross, but that was a reality of how I was living as a child. And, shoplifting for me, become a way of life. Hanging out in haunts that weren't really healthy, become a way of life. As a youngster, Plymouth, where I'm from, the historical town of Plymouth, was awash with paedophile circles. Do you know what I mean? With, it was like, you had him down there, the biggest wrong'un in the country, William Gold. Do you know what I mean? It's like he had all the open air markets down there. He kind of had that Ben's World down in Cornwall. Vile human being, entrapped so many vulnerable young boys. Do you know what I mean? And I think he had the biggest marker on him for, abusing the most young boys ever kind of known in the history of pedophiles, and he ended up dying in jail, I heard, but he never touched me. I was quite fat and ginger and quite loud. I had quite a raging father. So whether that was, kind of wise, because I remember getting caught shoplifting in one of his places, and I was with another friend of mine, good looking boy. And I'm sure he come out with a bit of a, do you know what I mean? And like he got hold of him or something, but it never kind of preyed on me. And, And,
what do you mean his places?
Yeah. I got caught shoplifting in one of his bargain discount stores years ago. Because after he had the open air markets, he had all the discount stores in the city.
Open air markets.
Open air markets.
Okay, like outside market.
Yeah, but he used to, he used to fly in and target all the vulnerable kids from broken families, vile human beings. I've got so many friends who have lost their lives along the way due to drug addiction, due to drink, because they couldn't come to terms with the horrific consequences, do you know what I mean? Left from that vile monster, and a lot of them are 6 foot under because of him. Do you know what I mean? And, it's my brother, Chrissy, he always says, some stuff happened with him, but whether that is or not, he won't mind me saying, he tells everyone anyway. Chris.
How about the people that did make it and did heal from that abuse?
Yeah, a lot of them got, big compo claims, but there was a lot more to it, Gaz. It was a big hierarchy. It's like in Plymouth, when I was a kid, I used to attend the Stonehouse Marine Barracks. You were kind of enforced to go. It was a good thing to be seen to do it. There was fucking paedophile rings in them places constant. Do you know what I mean? One of my he was like my cousin. Do you know what I mean? He excelled in that place. I found out years later he was groomed, abused, do you know what I mean, by one of the PT instructors. Recently, one of the instructors down there, Paul Roof, who was a PT instructor, Mr. Braddon's son, he kind of was sentenced. He was a headmaster of a school and everything. He was sentenced for grooming young boys back. Huge paedophile ring. All gets kind of put under the carpet. I've got friends that are dead that, were abused in the Marine Cadets. And, I ended up getting chucked out of there when I was about 12 for stealing the Marine's night jacket. Do you know what I mean? And, so... yeah, I could have been in the bloody army, couldn't I, really? But anyway, that's another story.
Can you remember what was like the first thing you stole?
The first thing I stole. The first thing.
Or something that sticks in your memory.
It would have been like chocolate. Do you know what I mean? It would have been something like that. Do you know what I mean? It would have
just
been
at the shops.
Yeah, shops. And we used to all hang around in this, they used to have this big ice skating rink called Fiesta when I was a kid. And you would get the congregation of all the, dysfunctional children from the areas. Do you know what I mean? Different areas coming together and they would all be hanging out there. And I was from the town centre, the Stonehouse area. And that was, the place that you went and, within them places, the dynamics that go on, were mental. There were some great times there, probably some best times of my childhood there, but some of the most awful times too. Do you know what I mean? And, it kind of like, I believe I've kind of got a very addictive personality. And, as a child left to my own devices, I used to be up there from like 8 o'clock in the morning till it shut 10 o'clock at night.
What was that?
A big ice skating rink full of one-armed bandits. Do you know what I mean? But it was huge. This was a big square meter place.
One-armed bandits?
One-armed bandits. And
What's that?
fruit machines.
Okay.
Fruit machines.
Okay.
Fruit
Okay.
machine. And I was a wizard at them. I was a wizard, Gaz, at fruit machines. You know, I could get you the jackpot on any fruit machine, more or less, especially like each way nudger, light up a light. I could tell you the reels, what fruit was behind it. So when people
Oh.
had the nudges, they would give me 20p, I would get them the jackpot. Do you know what I mean? That soon escalated. You know, I'd be bloody, you know, hooked on. You know, I'd be obsessed with these. Remember, I've got stuff going on at home. Yeah, I don't want to be at home. It's fucking chaos at home. Yeah.
Sure.
So I'm looking for ways to kind of fix that internal kind of setup. And fruit machine addiction kind of took me away from all that as a kiddie.
How
And,
old was you then?
I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
About 8 years old. You know, you're kind of prone to wrong uns. You're hanging around with a lot of older guys. Do you know what I mean? You know, in dodgy circumstances. But I was feeling like the little mascot in the embrace of all that for a period of time. You know, I was kind of, you know, groups of us used to just steam the shops. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, they'd be getting me to fill up the bag to walk out because I'm young. I'd get away with it if I was caught. And, you know, it just kind of progressed. It led. Before I knew it, I was feeding a fruit machine addiction. Before I knew it, you know, I'm strimming fruit machines. You know, before I know it, I'm popping them open with bloody screwdrivers to get the money out of there. You know, my whole life and being was consumed around that kind of environment. And I really kind of, that was in an enjoyable way of life for me for many years, you know. Plymouth was quite awash with like arcades. You used to have Futurama down the road. You had Top Rank, that was another skating ring. That was all closed, turned into a big rave place later on, years down the road. And you had Leisure Inn, you had Dusters, you know, they were all fruit machine where all the youngsters used to hang out in, you know. But when you're hanging out in these places, you also get a lot of wrong uns hanging out in them places. Do you know what I mean? So you're subject, and you see a lot of stuff that you shouldn't really see as a child. And Plymouth was awash with that. You know, I remember there was big lorry parks where the pavilions was before Sainsbury's was there. Lorry parks. I used to go along with guys. We tapping the lorry. Can we look after your lorry? Do you know what I mean? I would hear of stories where some of them would get grabbed out by the lorry drivers. Do you know what I mean? And you know, proper abuse. You know, but that's how it was. You know, Plymouth was like, you know, built really after it was fucking blitzed in the war. So the structure of it, do you know what I mean? It took time to kind of reform it and, you know, get it where it needed to be. But, you know, Plymouth, for the place it was in the early kind of 80s, 90s, you know, was awash with a lot of kind of wrong dynamics, covered up by a lot of hierarchy. Do you know what I mean? That are no longer there, really. And very sad to say, you know, which causes huge dysfunction later on in generations.
Did you have any sort of positive influences
as a kid?
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of like, I found myself kind of like, I did, you know, I had a few good role models around me. Do you know what I mean? But the role models I looked at, they were all like top thieves. They were like going to Europe thieving and, do you know what I mean? Doing walk-ins on, you know, they were burgling jewelry shops. They were doing walk-ins on hotels. They were getting, you know, big money. And that's the kind of, you want to aspire to be like. I certainly did. Good friend of mine, he's dead now. God bless you, Jason Ford. You know, one of the best walking thieves I ever knew at the time. Really good looking fella. You know, I used to use the gear with Jason later on in life. And, you know, he was just like a money magnet. Money magnet. He would walk into a property and before you know it, he'd find your life savings. You know what I mean? You know, I sit here today and I'll say it like it's some, you know, awful to be stealing someone's life savings. But at the time, that's what I adhered to. That was the kind of role models in my life I wanted to aspire to be like, because I had known really nothing different. You know, schooling, you know, I went to the local Oxford Street school, you know, to appease my father. Do you know what I mean? He even sent me out to Plymouth Comprehensive School from the city centre because he grew up in Plymouth in the Who area to kind of, you know, to try and, you know, give me a better way of life. But all I was interested was shoplifting down at the Broadway every day when I was there. You know, VHS videotapes. You know, I used to have a buyer, I used to have a doorman in the Fiesta and he would buy as many videotapes as you could get. And when you're young and you're a shoplifter, you could get some videotapes. Do you know what I mean? You'd be getting like $2.50 a tape off him. And that's a lot of money when you're a kid. Do you know what I mean? You know, 40 odd years ago. And, you know, I'm not going to mention his name. I know he is if he sees this, but he must have some bloody video collection these days, I'll tell you.
What did you do with all that money?
Well, me, I was quite a shrewd kid, believe it or not. I had a fruit machine addiction going on. I had an addiction to thieving, shoplifting. I was a prolific shoplifter. You know, I became a prolific shoplifter. I became an individual that kind of, you know, got banned from every store in time in town. And, you know, you couldn't go in. There wasn't a great deal of CCTV back in the day. You know, I used to have a big German Shepherd, long-haired Alsatian, and he would every command he would do for me. I could set him on to anyone, yeah? I should take him shoplifting me, so no store detector would come near me. They'd be paranoid, all the police would be called out, but I'd be in and out of town with him. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't come near me. And it was just that kind of extra protection. He was called Eric, he was.
Wow.
First time I ever took acid, Eric, I was out at night with him, and I took an acid tab, and he started growling at me. He kind of knew the road I was heading on.
Ah.
Funny how dogs sense this stuff. Do you know what I mean, guys?
Yeah.
And
How old was he then?
must have been about 16,
Mm.
yeah. Because my life didn't really, you know, evolve until about 16 around, you know, substance abuse and addiction, you know, to substances and whatnot. But it's always been chaos. You know, my life growing up, if I'm honest, you know, was always been in the mix of chaos, dysfunction, you know, but trying to carry, you know, but knowing you're kind of a decent soul under all that. Do you know what I mean? Not committing wrong acts, you know, just to kind of, you know, get by and be part of something and, you know, kind of, you know, have what most people take for granted these days. You know, I didn't have that. So I was quite a grabalicious kid. I wanted, and if it wasn't tied down, I would steal it.
Looking back at it now, looking back at your journey, what do you feel that could have been the turning point, if like for you to go down a more positive route?
Well, you know, I could have, you know, I'd been involved with kind of social services to a degree as a youngster. You know, probation was always kind of, you know, predominant in my life. I'd been on probation for, I think, about 14 years until I come into recovery. And I come into recovery at like, you know, 26 years, just turning 26 years old. So I've been on probation from about 12 years old. Do you know what I mean? 14 years I was on probation orders. And mental, that is really. So I did have positive role models. You know, I was like the probation blue-eyed boy really of Plymouth at one time. They sent me off to Caister holiday camp, not one occasion but 2 occasions, unheard of.
What's that? What
Caister holiday camp was a Schedule 11 probation that they brought around. They bring about these new programs sometimes for difficult kids, and they sent me off there. I remember I had breakfast with Frank Bruno.
Oh yeah,
I met Prince Charles.
He's coming,
when he
he's coming
first
here
set
next
up
week,
the
couple of weeks.
when he first set up the Prince's Trust, Prince Charles, I was kind of in the mix of all that. Do you know what I mean? And you know, I went on that Caister holiday camp twice, and I kind of guess they felt for me, really. Do you know what I mean? The probation workers. There were some lovely, well-meaning people in my life growing up. Do you know what I mean? Who really tried to steer me right. But again, when you've got a bit of an addictive personality, do you know what I mean? And you know, you're more void to go the other way constantly, in my experience. And that's what happened.
What was your first drug you took?
My first drug I took was amphetamine.
Okay, speed.
Amphetamine, yeah, speed.
Speed, yeah. And what age was that?
Well, 16.
16.
What happened for me, you know, this is where I know I've got such an addictive personality, and I believe the traits and all that's been with me because of all the habits that were formed before I picked up. They were all there. Before I picked up drugs, it just felt so normal. I was banned from every arcade in the city. All the arcades I mentioned just now, Futurama, Leisure Inn, Dusters, Fiesta, I was all void. I was banned from them all for strimming the machines, robbing the machines, whatever. Do you know what I mean? And or just being a bloody complete nuisance. I would have probably had an ASBO against me. Do you know what I mean? Back in the day, if they were about then. And it felt like my whole world had come to an end. And I was hanging out up this pool hall, big pool club it was at the time. And a lot of them used to go there. Do you know what I mean? The kind of rave scene. This was like early 90s, I would say. The rave scene had just come to Plymouth.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of electrifying, guys.
Yeah,
It kind of lit the city up like the fireworks do on Plymouth Hoe. You know, it was a big deal. And I remember I was in the pool club. I was kind of intrigued. A friend of mine said, yeah, I'll try some of this. So I swallowed it. And this girl, I really fancied this girl. I could never have the confidence to tell her that I fancied her. She's called Lynn. She had the most piercing eye. Funny enough, I ended up going out with her in early recovery many years later. Wow. And it wasn't for me. But no offense, Lynn, you're a lovely woman. And I swallowed this speed and it kind of just done something to me. It done something to me. It took away all them inhibitions, all them fears, all them anxieties, all them kind of, inadequacies that I've lived with for a long time. But it also made me feel quite sick after,
Oh, yeah.
But within a very short time frame, Gaz, I wanted more. And again, the rave scene had come along, with the addiction with me. My experience is, it become chronic quite quick, within a very short time of, swallowing ecstasy and partying in Plymouth and, the kind of Zenas, my friend's dad, Costas, his dad, Michael, he's dead now, God bless him, nice fellow, Michael. And, well, people will argue that, but I always found him a nice, decent fella. Funny enough, he's buried right next to me mum. My mum is buried with all the Greek fraternity up at Efford Cemetery, and they got the best view, I believe, over the city. So over the embankment and that. So yeah, and he used to have a big rave club. He was like the Rockefeller, Michael, of the city.
Oh, yeah.
He owned all the club land. Do you know what I mean? He was like and he had Zena's, the rave club, and that was like right below the pool club, and it's. Yeah, it was great. You had a good turnout there. Do you know what I mean? And ecstasy become everything until it become nothing. Other drugs took hold and took over. And within a very short time period frame for me of taking ecstasy, I found myself injecting intravenously using amphetamine. And, as a 16, 17-year-old doing that stuff, it's kind of quite it was quite powerful for me. And you kind of get recognized for it by a lot of the older crew. It's but it wasn't all bad. There was some real highs, amongst the lows. And I kind of didn't start hitting rock bottom till later on, but I went at it quick. I went and got myself I started, like, where I had all fucking services involved in my life and everything. I went to the doctor. I said I had a massive Valium problem. I was scripted fucking high amount of benzodiazepam at like 16, 17 years of age. High amount of temazepam, 16, 17 years of age. I kind of prescribed methadone before I was even into heroin, but I was a chronic amphetamine user throughout this time. Even though the rave scene was going on, those kind of days were getting numbered, but I was kind of hanging around with guys that were going thieving in Europe. I used to go with a guy called Zico, God rest his soul, he's dead now. We used to go over there and, we'd be sneaking in places and, creeping hotels late at night and, getting up to all sorts. Do you know what I mean? Feeding the addiction and, having some touches and having some real difficult time. I remember one time getting caught in a hotel in the Swiss Alps about 3 o'clock in the morning. Some guy chasing me with a machete. Do you know what I mean? I'm like 17 years old and I'm running down and Zeke, he's gone in my car. I had a little Metro Turbo at the time. He's gone in the car. I'm thinking I'm getting hacked up here. And the guy never got hold of me. And how Zeke, he was gone. But he came back and he found me down some country road in the Swiss Alps. It was fucking wolves howling. It was like, oh man, what a turnout. But managed to get to some kind of safe, got the car. And
what were you doing then to get chased with a machete?
We was in the hotel creeping a room and someone had woke up. Do you know what I mean? And all fucking not good stuff really. And it was kind of like, it was like the in thing to do, the cool thing to do. Where we were from, if you got in with the older boys who were hitting up Europe, you were seen to be, they were coming back with big parcels of jewelry. They were kind of,
making it.
Yeah, because all the systems in play over there, the border crossings, do you know what I mean? I remember one time going across the border, and I've gone to swallow a bit of hashish that I've got, and it's in a sealed bag, and we're at customs, coughed it up, it's landed right on the sniffer dog's nose. And the dogs just looked at me like that, like bemused, but didn't pick up on it.
No, they didn't,
man. No, got through. But yeah. Something you get a slap on the wrist for today, but you'd probably got chucked in the jail or got 3 months for back in the day.
Okay.
So yeah, funny. But we used to shoot all over the place, end up in Amsterdam, be down in, in Zurich. My first kind of introduction to Needle Park in Zurich, Mento. This park, it was just crazy. It was like all store set, people just walking in, having hits off the street. Really opened my eye. Do you know what I mean? And just craziness I was exposed to really as a teenager. And But the high life never lasts. Never lasts. You know what I mean? You can be flying high for a good period of time in your drug addiction. But the flying high, there comes big lows.
Oh, yes.
In my experience, them big lows have outweighed any of the big highs. You know, you can be rocking and rolling, thinking you're fucking this. Do you know what I mean? Before you know it, you're flat on the floor, and you know you're out kind of just feed an addiction that's kind of got you old, that you don't want it to have you old, and you're kind of using, and you just don't want to be using, and you know later on that's what become. Yeah, there's been, you know, I had an early kind of introduction into the recovery process. I kind of like, you know, I was in a blues club. I was down in Union Street one night, and I was with a guy I'd met. He was a mixed race guy and really nice guy. He was like around the rave scene. He was from London, and I was in the toilet and I was injecting loads of speed. I was a really chronic amphetamine user, and all, you know, I was scripting all these other stuff, and you know, if I could put it in my arm, I would have. Do you know what I mean? If I couldn't put it in my arm, I'd force it away to get it in my arm. You know, bad. I remember dirty hits off speed, putting in congealed stuff, forcing it in. You know, I wasn't letting that stuff go. It was kind of chronic come the end, you know, and I was in this blues club, and it was all kicked off down the Malt House a couple of nights before, week before, whatever, with all the swilly lot and all the TC, which was like the local football hooligans in the town, and it kicked off, and it was real heavy. A few people got really hurt, and I was in this blues club, and it all kicked off there. Poor Avril, who was managing the place, I was in the toilet injecting. I've come out, and I've just come out to a melee of violence. It was kicked off. The mixed race guy, I can't remember his name, he got stabbed about 18 times by some of the TCE guys, and it was just like, and I was sat there, and I've just like looked around, and some of us people have the most sincere desire to stop using in the most maddest of places. And I, at a moment of clarity, I know it today, in the most maddest of places, I come out of that and I said, I don't want this no more. I do not want to be using to this extent and living how I'm living no more. Boy, was I in for a shock. I kind of went back to, I was living in Stonehurst. My mother said, my mother was so good throughout my addiction, as fear-based as I was around my father. You know, as much as the dysfunction that was going on at home, she would always have a bed for me.
Oh.
My mother would always have a room for me. Would never, only once did she turn her back on me, and that was one time. I remember I got arrested for I was a commercial burglary on the old AA building. It's like a shower room place down in Plymouth city centre. But I had a warrant outstanding up in Exeter. Listen to this. This is weird. Hopefully they don't pick up on it. But what happened? I got taken into Charles Cross for about 5 days. And I was ill. Back in the day, they ain't giving you your benzos. They're not giving you no methadone. You're lucky if you're getting a bit of juice, you know, like Largactyl juice, or, you know.
Hospital.
They wouldn't take me to hospital back in the day. No, they would. I'll share some stuff about this in a minute. But back in the day, you weren't getting nothing. You're ill. In them police cells, you're ill. You get to see the doctor. You're lucky if you get a couple of DF118s, you know.
Oh, right.
And I was on a heavy script for a teenager. They held me in Charles Cross for 5 days. I was so poorly, guys.
Prison.
Yeah.
Jail.
The police station, or local police station. But what they done then, they took me up on an outstanding warrant to Exeter, for some other offence that I'd committed up there. I can't remember it rightly, but I can remember going into Exeter Crown Court cells. It felt like the dungeons. It felt like how I was feeling, because I was rattling off methadone, had none for 5 days, no Valium for 5. I was ill. You know, I wasn't fitting. Do you know what I mean? How they could allow that is shocking, you know, inhumane. But that's how it was in the day. And I remember I was going into Exeter cells, and I seen these barristers there, and I said, "Excuse me," I said, "could you represent me?" I said, "I've never been in trouble in my life." I said, and didn't think nothing of it. He's like, he's come into the Crown Court cell a bit later, this guy, and he tried to say, "I'll represent you. We'll deal with it today. The judge is happy to deal with it." And I'm thinking, what? So I said, "Look, I've never, you know, been in trouble. What the warrant I had in Plymouth, what they brought me there, it was no charge brought to it." The judge, one of the worst circuit judges at the time, I think it might have been Cottle or Neville or someone, seen me that day. And because it was, you know, it gave me a 2-year probation order and some other kind of order. But lo and behold, known to them, I've got previous. And I just got a 2-year probation order, maybe 3 weeks before, in Plymouth Crown Court for another offence. So when I got released from there on a probation order with them not checking my criminal record,
Wow.
and then going back to Plymouth, sitting my probation officer, I know the probation officer now because I've worked with him. He's looked at my file and he's gone, hey, you got a probation order here. He said, how's that come around? I said, I don't know. And he went, oh, okay. And just moved on from it. But I believe that my mother, the story is, I got released from there and I ran from there to my chemist to get my Valium and methadone because I was so ill, guys, so ill. And I bumped my mother. I walked past her, down in Stonehouse. She was walking up near the mobile park. And I just ran back. She completely blanked me, looked to the floor. And that was the only time my mother has really lost face with me and kind of been cold towards me. Do you know what I mean? Because I looked so poorly and ill because of my addiction. You know, again, I went there, got me Valium and me methadone, and bang, went back, and just onwards, as it goes. But
she couldn't bear looking at you.
Yeah, I can remember them, and I don't blame her. I was kind of like, come the end of my use, and I used to have people cross the street. They all put a title on me that, when the AIDS virus come around, because I was like a walking 1 mil for years. I kind of
Walking
like the
what?
speed use, like I looked like a 1 mil syringe. I was that big, and people used to cross the street. People would spit at me. I can remember times I was injecting dirty water in puddles because people wouldn't let me in their flats outside. I get reminded of stuff like that. It became very horrendous, my addiction come the end. And, I kind of, I don't forget them dark times. I kind of know I've had a lucky escape, and, there's better men than me that are kind of not living in a fruitful life today who have perished. People that used to give me a real hard time. I used to remember a lot of Scousers when I was young. They were all down, breaking into bookies, and they would all give me a dog's life for being on, the amount of Valium I was on, and, the IV using I was doing. I can remember times waking up with my ears bleeding. Do you know what I mean? I can remember times being restrained by police in Plymouth Town Centre and pissing blood the next day because they've yanked my balls that much. Do you know what I mean? And, just kind of dismissing that kind of stuff. And, you don't forget, but you kind of, you remember this stuff. Do you know what I mean? But yeah.
So when that was all kicking off at the Blues Club, okay, you had that epiphany. Great stuff. Where did you go from there?
I went back to my mother's house and I said, I'm not using no more, to myself. And boy, was I in for a shock. I remember I was in the bottom room at the time, got in there, locked it all up because I didn't want me for my father. If I went out of bed in the morning, he'd be kicking the door through, dragging me out, one of them. Do you know what I mean? And I was in there and I just tried stopping. I tried stopping of my own accord. And as you know, if you've been using benzodiazepam, you've been using methadone to mazepam, and you're you can't just stop them kind of drugs like that. You need medical supervision. Yeah, but I was adamant. That I wanted to stop. And I remember just kind of stopping and losing my mind, going into a psychotic state. I've had psychotic episodes. I've been in kind of, I've been in Moorhaven as a youngster trying to level out in detox, the local psychiatric ward. I've experienced them dynamics in them places. And I used to feel really comfortable in them places, if I'm honest. And I remember just laying there and wanting to die, basically. Couldn't give a toss if I died, if I lived. And I remember my mother coming down and saying, "You're right, son." And I told her I swallowed the quilt because my stomach felt so heavy and, my mind wasn't there. I tripped out. I went into another kind of dimension. It was really spooky, guys, really weird. And, I can remember them taking me to the doctors and the doctor taking one look at me and said, "Get him to hospital now." And I went into hospital, but then I went into another phase in my mind, a real psychotic episode. I can remember a lot of it. And, I thought I had a house in Ivybridge. I was living with Madonna. She was with some gay guy that was putting all these material bags in my throat when I was asleep. Weird. It was spooky. And, I was all snowed in out there with her and couldn't get out. And
with who?
With Madonna. This was where my head was at the time. I was gone. I was in a psychotic state.
Yeah.
Living a nightmare, but that was my reality from coming off all the substances. But what happened and occurred to me, my body started shutting down in the process of stopping all these drugs. So where I was rushed into hospital, they had me in the high dependency unit, but I'd lost my speech. I couldn't speak and my mind was gone. So I couldn't tell them what had gone on. I couldn't tell them I'd just experienced the shock of seeing someone get stabbed about 18 times, seeing it flare up in this blues club and coming off all the Valium or the methadone or the street drugs and just stopping it. I couldn't tell them that because my mind was fragmented.
Could not talk.
Couldn't speak. couldn't speak. My
Oh,
mind,
shit.
I realised I was in the hospital, but then I was somewhere else, and I was in this like cartoon world in my head. This peaceful place became in my head. I know today I had a near-death experience in that hospital in 1995. This was, Gaz, and real powerful kind of experience. And it was like it opened me up to the embrace of something very different in my life. And lots of us people who are addicts, you know, we have to go through a lot of horrific conditions. Do you know what I mean? Before we start to settle for, you know, a normal way. Like if we make it through that, and I'm fortunate I made it through that, but I was so lucky because it felt that peaceful and my life was so chaotic out there. I was quite happy to just go with the peace and the flow of it. You know, my life flashed in front of me. I could see myself being grown up as a child, being carried around on my father's shoulders, living off rubbish tips. A lot of my reality was all entwined with the kind of, you know, the psychosis that I was experiencing. Remember, I'm coming off all this benzodiazepine and, you know, but it felt so peaceful and tranquil. It was like these lights keeping me alive in the hospital, like these lights here, but they were switching around. I could feel the energy from them. And, you know, I withered away to 7.5 stone in weight. And I thought I had AIDS at the time because that's how I looked. Everyone said it anyway. And never thought of having a bloody AIDS test. You know what I mean? I used on that for years thinking I had AIDS and never did. And yeah, a real profound experience occurred and a near-death experience in the hospital. I remember I heard a machine go next door to me, like a couple beds up from me. And the guy had died, he flat whatever. And then I came back. I heard his machine go, and it's almost like it. I know this sounds a bit airy fairy, people, but this is my truth. And it felt like a spirit jumped from him into me and revitalized me in that moment and brought me back to the here and now in that hospital ward and gave me breath of life again. Because my mind was in that hospital ward from then on. And I've been out of it for about 12 days in a completely different place, but quite happy to wither away and die. You know, I had a bit of a spiritual experience at that time, that encounter in my life, which gave me a new lease of life, I believe, some way, shape, or form. And it was like I was back in the hospital ward. My throat was all done with thrush. My bowels felt so heavy because I hadn't been, do you know what I mean? It was kind of my leg, I lost all the balance on my feet. I was ruined. I remember my mother there, my father there, squeezing an orange down. I said, squeeze the orange down my throat because it trickled down and I could taste. So my taste buds were gone. And as soon as I could taste, the first thought that come to my mind was Valium and a 2 mil barrel of speed. Now, if that's not addiction at its full force, I don't know what is. I've just been through the most horrendous situation. And here I am thinking the only thing that's going to get me on my feet is some blue Valium and a 2 mil barrel of speed. You know, that's where I was at with it all, Gaz.
What's 2 mil barrel speed?
Well, instead of the 1 mil injections, the big fat 2 mil ones.
Oh, okay.
You know, that was my thing. You know?
Wow. So who took you to the hospital?
A lady called Karen Wilson and my mother.
Okay.
Yeah, they
That was
whisked me out there in their car
friend.
from the doctor's surgery. Yeah,
Oh,
she always reminds me of that. This woman, Karen, bless
yeah.
her. She just lost her husband, Jimmy. Yeah, she's a really nice woman, and I like Jimmy too. But yeah, they took me there. She always reminds me of that. She said, "You remember that?" I said, "Yeah."
So after that,
because you know, I'm not amazed I'm sat here today, Gaz. There's plenty of people that are. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Because of the state of my affairs. And but yeah, I come through there and I got referred to my first ever primary treatment centre. It's called Broadreach House at the time. It's a 12-step unit, but they couldn't take me in straight away. It was unheard of too to get referred from a treatment centre from the hospital at the time. I was like one of the first cases, and they got. I went back to my mother's house and it was Christmas's time, carried on doing what I'm doing. I remember going up like, because I was using heroin too at the time and speed. And I remember going up Chrissy Pugh's house. He's dead now, God bless him. And my mind was so fragmented while I was waiting for the treatment to come through. But all I could eat was Angel Delights because my sugar levels and everything, it was kind of gone. But I was still not fragmented. I was ripping up his carpets. He was selling heroin from the flat up at Elm Terrace. He ended up dying up there, Chrissy Pugh's, bless him. I remember ripping up his carpets, thinking I've hid jewelry there, diamonds, do you know what I mean? Gold. And, you know, when people have psychotic episodes on crack, yeah, it was very similar, but mine was through damaged because of the high use of amphetamine. And I used to be saying, "What are you doing, Reese? Fuck's sake." Do you know what I mean? Ripping me out, supporting. I have other people coming up and looking at me all strange and look at the state of you. And, you know, because I was really poorly, physically, mentally, spiritually. You know, there wasn't long left for me if I didn't make some dire change and take a different course of direction in my life. And, You know, I was referred to that treatment center a few weeks later, and it opened up something very different. But you know, for many of us people in our journey of recovery starting, you know, the experience isn't perfect. You know, I can remember going into that primary treatment center. I spent 8.5 weeks on a benzo detox, even though I'd just done a horrendous detox in the hospital, found myself back on benzos. I remember them doing it because my blood pressure was all over the place. I had one of the longest detox in Broadreach history, and I ended up staying in there for about 13 weeks when I should have been there for 8 weeks. Went on to the secondary unit, Close Reach House at the time, run by a fantastic psychotherapist. I've never met an individual like this in my life, called John Fugler. Shout to you, John Fugler. You're one of the top men, you know, that kind of, you could reach guys that nobody could reach. And I really wanted him as my counsellor when I was there, but I wasn't. I got the hard line of the old AA guy, Gerard. Do you know what I mean? And I was not feeling it with him at all. And I ended up using in Close Reach House after being there for about 6 months. Poxy bit of smack between about 4 of us. Couple of us colluded with each other, used, and my story is a story of relapse, you know, and my story is of, you know, a story of trying to get it back together and, you know, losing the plot in the process of relapse. I've had some horrendous experiences in my relapse. When you've been that poorly and you choose to go and use again, your spirit's done. The drugs ain't doing it no more. The spirit is kind of smashed to bits, and I kind of was using against my will. And
So can we just go back to that psychologist that you mentioned that you've never met no one like him? What? Tell me about him a little bit.
John Fugler is one of the best psychotherapists I've ever met in my life. He trained up all the top counsellors in the country, Beachy. He even told me later on in my life to get involved with counselling. He got hold of my counsellor, Clive, at Broadreach House. And said, you need to steer Lee into this field of work. And that's another story I'll tell you in a minute. But it's really, you know, it's really, really weird. But John, I went to John's funeral. He ended up with dementia or Alzheimer's, memory lost. And, you know, he died at a ripe old age. And he's buried in the most beautiful place down in Charlestown, down in Cornwall, near St. Austell. I went to his funeral, and he's got an amazing view over the bay. You know, what a lovely human being. That guy there, he helped so many individuals recover from trauma, from addiction. You know, he was like a godsend. He had hands like a god. Yeah, but you could just feel the energy of this man. You know, that spiritual kind of embrace that you feel when you connect with these spiritual beings. He had that about him. You know, like the monks and, you know, the higher up ones. Yeah, I've never felt it from many, but I felt it from him. Beautiful individual.
Can you remember any like philosophies that you passed on to you?
Well, I remember being in a group setting with him one time, and I'm like crucified and I'm broken. And I remember him saying, I just seen a gem in the room, and it was me. I was going to get honest about some stuff. Do you know what I mean? But I never. And he could just pick, he was just good. He was good. He was very insightful, and he was very in tune with his intuition. And he was a great guy to help others embrace their trauma and heal and get well. You know, I've never met anyone like him anyway. So big shout to you, JF.
Is he still here?
No, he's not.
Okay.
No.
Was he a substance abuser? No.
Funny enough, his son died. His son died of substance abuse too. And he was like a high figure in it. So you can't get away sometimes. Do you know what I mean? You know, from it. Sad to say.
So he was never...
No, he was an addict. He was an addict, John.
How did he get into the counselling? Was it through his son or?
I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue. I didn't really look too far into his history, Gaz. But I know he trained up a lot of counsellors who went on to run establishments. And, you know, Close Reach House at the time had the highest success rate for recovery throughout Europe. It was one of the top-notch places. I went in there with hair and I'll come out with none. It mortified me when I wasn't ready for recovery. Frazzled my brain.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so continue where
after I left Close Reach House, I was half stable. I remember I was first introduced to Narcotics Anonymous, another 12-step fellowship that I kind of, you know, I'm familiar with, and you know, I kind of attend these days, and I remember going there from the treatment center, and this guy coming up to me. It's called Jake. He was my first ever meeting I went to, and he come up to me. It was packed. I was coming off benzos. I was coming because part of the deal was in Broadreach House. You have to go to this Scott Hospital Friday meeting. And this guy come up to the end of the meeting. He went, "I know you." He said, "Yeah, you robbed me in Amsterdam." I'm like, what? My first ever meeting. That was my first interaction with another recovering. You know, what they teach us in this program is to be nice to the new man and keep them coming back. But that wasn't my experience. So I learned from that.
How did you deal with that scenario?
No, it was all right. It's just a dynamic. The guy didn't stay around too long, bless him. And yeah, but when I left there, because they didn't know I used, they asked me to come back and share at this meeting. But I had used. But the person who asked me to share didn't know I used.
Yeah.
The people I'd used within the treatment centre, they'd gone to London, got honest, got back to the treatment centre. So I'm sat on the Friday night after using in an NA meeting, doing a life story, telling everyone I'm clean. Everyone who sat there is from the treatment centre. They've announced it in the group that we've been using. I'm sat there declaring I'm clean, giving them a big spiel. All bullshit. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
You know, it's just like kind of the delusion that lots of us addicts suffer in our process of recovery. Do you know what I mean? And
so tell me how that planned out. So like you've come in, you've shared, you've shared.
I didn't get much of a round of applause, put it that way at the end.
Okay. And then like, so was it like half an hour or was it straight after?
Straight after someone put it on me, said, "Oh, we've heard you've used today." And I'm like, and that was it then. I didn't go back. I didn't go back. I remember friend Costas, my friend Costas, he was a decent friend of mine, and he was off to Cyprus, and he said, "You want to come?" And I just come out of like Broadreach. I kind of, my addiction hadn't really kind of taken too much. I thought I could drink, and I ended up going to Cyprus, and wow, that's another story too. And it's about late 96, middle of 96, I think, something like that. I don't know. And
so what was you using at that stage?
At that stage, I didn't have no habit. They detoxed me in the treatment centre, so I didn't go back on Valium.
No, but like when you was sharing, and they
I'd used heroin.
Okay.
I'd smoked probably that day or a day before, maybe about a £10 bag between four of us.
Yeah.
What a petty what a stupid thing to do when you've just had 6 months, 8 months of residential treatment chucked in.
No, so you all that
money
for 6
chucked
months?
in, clean, and then I've just boshed it all and kind of smoked £10 worth of gear with a few other people and just kind of dismissed all that. But I know my experience of kind of, coming into the world of recovery and living how I do, a lot of my experience has been getting it wrong to get it right.
Yes.
Relapse is part of my journey and a massive deal early on.
So like when you relapsed, what do you feel like you was missing? Because it sounds like
I'd done no work on myself, Gaz.
Oh, okay.
I'd done no healing from any trauma in my life. I didn't get honest about nothing that had occurred throughout my whole shebang of life. The real recovery deals start within. We got to start talking about a lot of stuff and get real about the deal if we want to stay around in this game any length of time, in my experience.
So you didn't have no clarity or direction?
No, I didn't get honest about nothing while I was in the treatment center.
Yeah.
I just kind of like, I kind of whizzed through it. And, if I'm honest, if I'm really honest, guys, I totally forgot to mention this. Half the reason why I went, when I was in Close Reach House, whilst I was out from the hospital, I'd kind of like been waiting to go into Broadreach House. I had an experience getting chased by the police. What happened was, I'll tell you, it was two episodes. I was so lucky. I've been so looked after by my higher power. I remember I was coming through Stonehouse one night after scoring. I had a kosh down the back of my I had a kosh, a homemade kosh. I got it off a guy I kind of knew quite well called Darren Pomfrey at the time. And I had this homemade kosh down the back of me thing. And some undercover police started chasing me, wanted to stop me. I had drugs. I was gone. Yeah. So I ran into Woolston Street. A guy I knew there called Dave Cusner. He's dead now. He died in anyway. And I've gone in. There was like a passageway to communal door, and then his flat door, and I remember it clearly. And Dave used to think he was 10 men. Yeah. He was like a 1 mil. Yeah. He was like nothing to him. But he was like, well, he's a gangster, but he was he's a funny guy and he was a nice guy. I loved him. And he's come to the door. I'm banging on the door. He's come out. He said, "What is it, Reese?" Like, I've pushed barge through him. I'm getting chased by 2 undercover police. Yeah. So he's holding the door. I'm holding the door there where I'm got in the communal door. I've pulled his kosh out. I'm trying to hit this police officer's hand away from the door where he's trying to push the door. But I've ended up clocking the copper on the head with the kosh. So in the end, I'm thinking, these are not giving up. So I've let go of the door, ran through Dave's bottom flat door and out the back of his flat. Little bit known to me, they've got him, they've hammered him. Do you know what I mean? The police thinking it's him that's coshed him over the head at the door. So he kind of put me in it around it all, and I ended up on a charge for it. And then about a week later, I bought this Montego EFI. It was lovely at the time. I had a touch of a bit of cash or something, and I remember I was driving up near the Salvation Army in Plymouth, and I hit a car, but like I'm like psychotic on speed. So I'm driving down Adelaide Street, Stonehurst. The police have tried to stop me. I've got a girl and another boy in the car. Funny enough, the girl contacted me the other week. I've been out from her for donkey years. So I put my foot to start to get. So put me foot. The police have tried to stop me. I've refused to stop. They've got their batons, put me window through. I've put my foot down the accelerator. One of the police, I've like knocked him half over the car, sped off, and gone up around Cecil Street, parked the car, and I had about an half ounce of speed in the car. I had some MOT fucking papers that I bloody stole from somewhere, and I left it on the car. And the police had got the car. It was I was like, and I remember ringing up the police later on the day. The car was in my sister's name. Hello, this is Julie Reese. I've had my car stolen, and they recorded the whole call. They've done me for perverting the course of justice, failing to stop at an accident. You know, it was kind of messy, and I remember all these charges were lingering, but they didn't know that I'd got into treatment. I was going into treatment a little while later. So I didn't tell the treatment coordinator until I was in treatment that I had these courses out, because I probably would never got in the treatment centre. So I was in the treatment centre with all this stuff hanging over me, and I went to court pleading not guilty whilst all this stuff was going on. And obviously, if you're on substances and you're out of your nut, you're getting found guilty. And I got found guilty. But they gave me an order to stay on at Close Reach House. Do you know what I mean? To fix up with the treatment pro. You know, I was very fortunate. I had a very well-meaning judge and someone looking over my back that day, because if I'd probably gone to prison at that time in my life, I probably couldn't have dealt with it. You know, I'd experienced a bit of, you know, Exeter as a teenager. I hated it. Didn't like prison. Do you know what I mean? Didn't like having liberty taken away from me. And yeah, I'd done a few remands over my teenage years in Exeter, and I didn't want to be going back there. And so I didn't.
How much jail have you done?
I've done 5 months on remand for burglary one time. I've been in for fines a few times. I've done another couple months on remand as a teenager, and I've done an episode in a foreign jail too. You know, which I'll come to in a minute and kind of tell you a bit about. That was a mental experience, Gaz. That was on a relapse. That experience in itself. I remember I was. A friend, my Greek friend, Kostis, come on, let's go to Cyprus. I'd just come out of the secondary treatment centre. I thought, yeah, I'll be all right. Have a drink and all that. I'll be all right. It's not, you know, even though they've been preaching abstinence for the last 8 months to me, and, you know, the 12 steps and all that stuff, I'm thinking, yeah, I'll be all right. I'll have a drink. So we've gone off to Cyprus, got a lovely apartment, swimming pool when we got there. Kostis, bless him, at the time, even got me a little job. We were painting up. He was in the Greeks because he had a lot of family out there at the time. And, you know, I remember he's Costas. He had a lovely BMW 325i. It was a bollocks car at the time. Do you know what I mean? This is like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So he's flying around in Iron Apple with this car. Yeah, I'm kind of like linked up with Cos. I grew up with him. And, you know, it's got pissed up one night. And he's put his foot down on it, pissed up, and he's gone smash right into a telegraph pole right outside a garage. Nearly killed me, ripped the car off, and it was just like mental. And we had a bit of a falling out where we were in the apartment. You know, I'm kind of like, you know, I want to be doing. I've had a few drinks, or when I've had a few drinks, I want some other stuff. And Valium is a key factor for me when my mood's altered. So before I know it, I'm out kind of black. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting Valium from here, there, and everywhere. And, you know, and I had a falling out with him. I was out, I'm doing some spate of thefts in shops out there. And I remember going into a shop out there, and I stole a few £1,000 from behind a shop counter in Greek money, which was a lot of money at the time. But lo and behold, to me, I didn't know. Fucking half the Hells Angels that kind of lived in Iron Apple, it was one of their family members' shop. So I had all these Hells Angels looking. So I just got a fucking car, got out of Iron Apple. I'm going down to Limassol. So I had peroxide blonde there. I dyed my hair peroxide blonde, yeah, because I'm ginger, yeah, and tried changing my kind of look.
Yeah.
And I proceeded to go down there. I burnt the clutch out on the car I had. Ended up going to see my mate Cozzy, who had a bar in Larnaca. He's dead now, God bless him. He was murdered down Union Street in a clubland fight. Horrific what happened to Coddy. Really nice fella. He had a lot of time for me. He used to buy all my shoplifting gear off me when I was young, Coddy. Do you know what I mean? He was sound. He was a nice guy, and one of the good ones. And he ended up getting beat to death in a clubland fight down in Union Street. The place got burnt down a few weeks later, and I ended up going to seeing him in his bar out there, and he was like living the dream out there. Do you know what I mean? With his thong. He was doing his water sports and all that, but I liked Cosy. But he ended up sending me on my way because I'm like manic when I'm using. Went down to Limassol, bumped into another friend of mine, Paul Adjiani. At the time, he was there with his missus at the time, his wife, I think she was, Debbie Hobbs. She's dead now, God bless her. She was there with her young kids, Jude and Louise, and it was so I just hitched up with them. And where I was on one, I was out creeping, doing whatever. I ended up stealing some credit cards out of a post box one night, and it was 2 English cards that had come through on the post. They didn't even know they were stolen, so I was out kiting cards, doing jewelry shops, kind of, going manic. But in this time, I'm going around hitting doctors up for scripts, but I'm finding the doctors over there, they keep their a lot of them, their chemist was in their place of work. So I'm going back at night and I'm robbing the doctor's surgeries for all. I'm driving around with rucksacks full of Valium, Rohypnol, fucking, do you know what I mean? Just kind of like loads of pills and loads of tablets I didn't really know. I ended up getting works, and it was really weird, but I was out, and the woman, she was coming with me, Debbie. I don't know if Paul had the ump about it, but I think he might have done. And I was out in the end. I was just saying to her, stay on the motorbike, and I'm going in jewelers and I'm grabbing jewelry and I'm just running out, jumping on the bike and doing one. And I really lost the plot in Cyprus. And then Adji went, you got to get away from here. So I thought, right, I'm going to go to Paphos. So I ended up on a motorbike, driving up through the Troodos Mountains. And I remember I had all these needles with me that I'd got from some doctor surgery and loads of pills. And I was going to start banging them up, because that was my thing. I'm a drug addict. That's what I do. And but I thought, let's go to Paphos first and let's try. And I didn't. It's really weird, but that's where my head was. No, I did. I think I started banging up again there. But I was out of my nut on pills, and when I'm out of my nut, I will do anything IV. And I ended up going to Paphos. Lo and behold, to me, the Cyprus police were looking for one of the ex-managers of HSBC in the UK, was out there committing massive fraud, and he had blonde hair. I'd only dyed my hair peroxide blonde. So I'm in a jeweller's in Paphos trying to buy a diamond ring on the card. Bang, police have come in, gunpoint, bam, boom, boom, guns, and I was arrested. And that was the end of my vacation in sunny old Cyprus, as I knew it. But I'm glad, if I'm honest, that in hindsight now, I'm glad I got arrested at the time I did, because of all the works I had. I mean, a lot of the tablets I didn't know, and I was going to be jabbing them up, because I'd bang up 10 G6, whatever. I'd kind of and if I could get into a needle, I would inject it. That's where my head was at. And I guess when you've had a taste of rehab, when you've had a taste of an awareness of something different in your life, of some kind of recovery process, and here you are, back in the fragments of using and living in that kind of way, it kind of clashes a bit with your spirit. And I ended up back at Limassol police station. Ended up charging me for £14,500 worth of jewelry, fraud, whatever. They ended up seizing the card. I'd lost it. I remember Poagiani, he used to come in and say, Lee, he'd be coming to the court and he'd be giving me more Valium and Rohypnol and Rohypnol, what they call them, date rape drug, innit? And they'd be knocking me senseless. But in the end, I turned my back on the bloody judge in the court, told him to get fucked. You don't do that in the courts of justice, yeah, especially in a Cypriot court, the attorney generals and all that. And I just lost the plot completely, giving it the big I am. I ended up refusing to leave the prison, the police station I was in. I was in the police station for 21 days. So I'd only been there 7. It was chaos in that police station. When I look at it, I'll tell you some stories about the police station over there. Probably get myself in trouble here. But they were like cages, they were.
Yeah.
And they were holding cells before you go to the main prison. But they used to have these decorators come around tidy up. And I met this one decorator. It was an American Greek guy called Lee, funny enough. And he said, Lee, act fucking crazy. They won't come near you in here. I'm like, yeah, I'm Valiumed out of my head anyway, so I don't give a fuck, right? But what they used to do in them holding cells, they would put a couple of their Greek cronies in to try and scare you to give them information. Do you know what I mean? For any other stuff, they would try and get stuff out of you and whatnot. And I remember there were a couple of like bully boys in there that I used to use, and Lee said, Lee, just act crazy, I won't come near you. I'm like, oh, fucking act crazy. I'm Valiumed out of my head. I didn't care. And I remember this guy flew across the exercise yard. I'm not a fighter. Yeah, I look after myself, but I'm not no kind of like kingpin fighter. And this guy who was bullying everyone, all the Russians, to get information out of him, and he was right arrogant Greek, no disrespect to Greeks, but he was a very sly individual. And he's tried targeting me. Do you know what I mean? Like trying, and I'm like pissed. Then he flew across the exercise yard at me. He's done a flying kick at me. But I caught his leg like that, and I just went whack and knocked him out cold in front of everyone. Yeah. So from that moment on, yeah, they thought I was something special.
Yeah.
I'm no big kingpin, but I had caught him a lucky punch, and it shook him up.
Yeah.
And it shook everyone else up around me. So from then on, I was known as a mad Englishman in this place. Yeah, and I was valiant up. I didn't care. And I ended up staying in there for 21 days. I'll tell you another story about that too. But, the police in Cyprus at the time, no disrespect here, but they were very corrupt. Very corrupt. Yeah. And if they could make a pound note, they would make a pound note. I remember I got talking to this guy in there called Tassos. And he was a Turkish guy, really good looking guy, green eyes. I remember him. He was like cool. And he was asking me how much like grams of heroin was in England. And it was about £100 a gram at the time. And he said, I said, what are you in here for? And he was in here for burgling a Turkish museum on the Turkish like border side. And he'd been arrested with all these Turkish pots. I said to him, mate, them Turkish pots in the UK be worth a bloody fortune. They were like 3,000 years before Christ. And he's going, yeah. He was like amazed what I was telling him. I'm like, didn't see nothing of him again. So I'm like, oh, queer. I've had all this chaos going on. In the end, they sent me to the local jail, which was Nicosia. In this time, I've told them I've got full-blown AIDS. Any of them fuckers come near me, I'm going to bite their nose off. Do you know what I mean? They were scared of me. Yeah. So when I got to the prison, it was like, this is 30 years ago. Cyprus Nicosia was one of the most brutal prisons in the whole of Europe. Yeah. I've witnessed people getting raped in that jail. I've been in a riot in that jail. Within the time frame I was in there, it was horrendous. Yeah. And bearing in mind, I'm going in there with the thought of Midnight Express. Yeah. I'm going in there, Valium out of my head, coming off Valium, and but I'm going in there with this reputation that I am a mad Englishman from what's happened in the police station and what they put me in the papers over there. He's got AIDS. I'm in the paper saying I've got AIDS and all that. 2 weeks into the prison visit, they took me to the hospital, took my bloods and all that. Said, no, he's clear. He ain't got AIDS.
What gave you the thought of saying that?
Because I just thought these buggers might try and rape me or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're in a jail, a foreign jail. You don't want any of these fuckers trying to get stuck up, yeah? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And but what they do with troublesome prisons in Cyprus back in the day, they had like the block cells, yeah, which was separate to the main prison, yeah, like a segregation unit. And there was this one individual in there, and he was dangerous. Yeah, he'd killing prostitutes. He'd been chopping them up. Yeah, he was called Anthony. He was like a big monk. Do you know what I mean? Like he had a bit of Downs or something. Yeah, but he was all muscle, this fucker, and he used to terrorize whoever the screws would put in there and terrorize. And you know what I mean? Sad state of affairs. They fucking chucked me in there for the first few days. Do you know what I mean? But he wouldn't come near me, Anthony, because he thought I had AIDS. Do you know what I mean? So he kind of left me to be, and but I ended up in mainstream population. I was really lucky. I got to know a screw. It was weird. He was a screw on the reception, and he said, "I know you." I said, "How? Where do you know me from?" He said, "Yeah, you Plymouth." He said, "I used to work in Zeus restaurant." I went, "Ah." He said, "Yes, you used to sell me stolen property when I was a kid. When you were a kid." I'm like, "What?" And he was called Andreas Elenas, class I. And I used to sell him dodgy gear when he was a kid in the Zeus restaurant because that was my thing, do shoplifting. Do you know what I mean? And he kind of looked after me, really. He kind of got a bit of money from my sister. My sister come over to visit from England. My sister had a Greek child, Charlie, Julie. I mentioned a lot about my family, but I've got 4 younger brothers and siblings. I'm the eldest of 5 kids. And thank God for family members sometimes, And she come over, she was traumatized, she'd been hearing stuff from, that this had happened, that had happened. Nothing had happened. Everything that had happened was created by me. Do you know what I mean? In the hysteria of kind of being in that environment. And I just found myself on a big script in the prison. All the time I was in the police station 21 days, and I got nicked with thousands of Valium on me. And they were in like Cadbury's drinking milk pots, yeah, and they were giving me handfuls every day. The screws in the police station were giving me handfuls.
No way.
No wonder I was in such a state in my mind and turning me back and swearing at the judge. And yeah, I lost every day. You get 5 days remission in the jail. I got sentenced to 6 months there. I ended up kind of losing all my prison time. Come the end of there was a big riot in there because a lot of the Iraqis were coming in as immigrants, and the screws over there. There was some decent screws, but there was some awful screws who were bullies, who were hostile. Do you know what I mean? You know, they would be stuck up. Some of the Iraqis were good looking. They'd be stuck up them in the cells, and you know what I mean? I ain't going to get into all that, but you know, you see some horrific stuff and you hear some horrific stuff. And when I'm hearing horrific stuff, I will not accept it. Yeah, I remember it kicked off there. I seen some Iraqis, Iranians getting hammered. They were by the screws, battered with their truncheons. I ended up smashing up my cell, calling the screws. Do you know what I mean? Fighting with the screws myself. I lost my time, and I was coming near the end of my sentence. And Andreas Alanas, he intervened, and I managed to get it on my time frame. Do you know what I mean? But I was lucky, man, because of the riot that unfolded at the end of my sentence in there. And Cyprus jail these days, people see it on telly. It's got a human rights lawyer, yeah, ex-human rights lawyer who runs the jail. She's a governor. They've got the cushiest jail. I want to go back there for a holiday and stay in the prison. It looks that good compared to when I was there back in the day. Let me tell you that. Funny enough, I've been back to Cyprus loads of times ever since I got banned for 5 years, but I go back, you know, because I'm free to do all that today. And I ended up, my mother fell into a coma, bless her. My mother went for heart surgery, and she fell into a coma whilst I was in the prison in Cyprus. Lucky she was, really, because of the misery I would have inflicted on her. Do you know what I mean? Worrying about her eldest son in a foreign jail. So she was in a coma. When I was released from that jail, we both arrived home at 14 Hastings Street within an hour of each other. So I come home, do you know what I mean? Been like escorted back on the plane, I got back, and we arrived. Isn't that beautiful to know that you arrive home within an hour of your mother, and she was kind of well then, she was alive. Do you know what I mean? Because it wasn't very long after my mother died, God bless her, you know. But just to have that beautiful encounter at that time is like a God-given moment in my experience, and it was a beautiful experience. So I came back to Plymouth after that experience. A friend of mine was in a new rehab down in Cornwall. He talked me into being able to get me in there. You didn't need funding. It was run on housing benefit. I need to tell about another experience too, which is not great. You know, when I was in Cyprus, you know, why I went to the rehab as soon as I got back to Plymouth. I forgot about this episode, but this is nuts. I remember being over there and I bumped into two guys from Plymouth, and they were both like TCE guys at the time. And they're friends of mine today. I don't hold no bad feeling. I don't believe they hold any bad feeling towards me. But I was out drinking, Valiumed up while I was in Limassol, and I ended up having a fight with him, and he had the better of me. Yeah. And I was raging about this. I went back because I knew where their apartment was. I robbed his apartment, robbed his Timberland shoes. And then I went and told my mate, Aji, at the time, I said, look, I've had that fella and the other fella, they're in. He went, what? That fella's here in Cyprus, yeah? And I've kind of created a bit of situation, really. I didn't know, to me, this fella, he had done Aji down the face at a warehouse rave a couple of months before in Plymouth, slashed him down the face. And he was in Cyprus, and Aji was a Greek. So he's got the Greek kind of, we need to go and see him there. Where are they staying? Me being me, I'm already in it because he's had the better of me in a fight. I said, he's at this fucking hotel. Let's go and do him. So Aji has loaded me up with a pickaxe handle at the time. My other mate who's with me as well, the Greek mate, he's given him a pickaxe handle. We put bandanas on, ran into the hotel, seen them in the hotel reception by the swimming pool. They're on holiday, these two guys. I've attacked one of them with a pickaxe handle. Aji has stabbed the other one, yeah? Where I've hit him with a pickaxe handle, he's gone back through the patio glass window, smashed all that. Everyone's screaming in the reception in this hotel in Cyprus, in Limassol. And he's fell in the water. Later on, I found out, you know, I'm not being funny, but, you know, God forbid me, you know, it's like I could have killed the guy. Do you know what I mean? You know, he could have killed the other guy through stabbing him because it was all kind of, you know, but that's the kind of world you're in at that time. And fueled by resentment, fueled by this, you know, I ended up really hurting this guy, severed his arm, all his tendons in his arm. And I knew I knew when I got released from prison, I never got arrested for it. It got wiped under the carpet because Adji had told the police over there that they were rapists or something. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So when he was in with the police, Adji, because his family had a lot of money and a lot of say over there, it was kind of dismissed quite easily. And, you know, Adji, you had a lucky escape. and yeah, but no, that's all got to be, you know, put to bed. And
Yeah.
you know, and I'm sorry about my part in all that at that time, because that's not me. That's what I was caught up in. Do you know what I mean? And I've said to this guy, you know, this occurred to, if I can do anything in any way, shape or form to put that right, I will. You know. And but yeah, weird. And I was petrified to go back to Plymouth after the prison stint then. I'm coming back to Plymouth knowing all this is going on. These guys are in with the TCE. They're in with the crew that are taxing everyone around all the raves. They're in with the football hooligans. They're in with the boys that I know are older, that I'm fear. You know, like, you don't mess around with these guys. And so I come out of jail. A friend of mine was down in a rehab down in Cornwall. It just opened. And it's still open now. So I'm not going to mention the name, but it was a farm place. And it was funded by a good friend of mine, Dave Bilk, the old jazz musician's brother, Akka Bilk's brother. And he got this beautiful farm off the ground. And I was one of the first residents to go down there. My other so-called mate, or only in a mate of mine now, tried flying into me missus when I was over here. I'm like, do you know what I mean? Meant to be a mate. And dog. I kind of went down there. I got coerced to going down there, and I went to this farm place down in Cornwall, and I was relieved to be down there because it was near Penzance. It was like miles away from Plymouth. I didn't want to go back to Plymouth because of all the kind of animosity of what gone on with these guys, and I ended up, you know, playing the game and getting into a rehab down there, and it was safe. It was safe, and I went to this rehab for 6 months down in Cornwall and Penzance, and you know, I'd managed to kind of stop the Valium that I was doing when I was in prison in Cyprus, let go of all the kind of, you know, bitterness around, and kind of conform to what they were asking there. And I just, you know, wanted to be in a safe space, and this was my only kind of solace at that time because I didn't want to go back to Plymouth, and I stayed down there. I stayed down there for 6 months. And whilst I was there for the 6 months, you know, I've made some good interactions with, you know, recovery based stuff with individuals, you know what I mean, in the recovery process. My only downfall for me was I didn't get real about all the stuff I needed to get real about while I had the professional help on hand. You know, I was a very secreted person in a lot of ways, and I needed to kind of like, you know, talk to someone about a lot of stuff. And, you know, I wasn't at that place still. And I went through there after 6 months. Weird. Went through there after, as soon as I left that facility down there, I ended up using again. I ended up using and hiding away down in Penzance for about a year and a half. I hitched up with another girl, Katie. She was on the gear, and, you know, she was like into just, we used to be like thieving. We used to drive to Plymouth and back every day just to score in, because heroin was like, it was very, there was like two dealers in Penzance, and I fucking petrified one of them by threatening to burn his house down and dead if he didn't serve me the gear, because I was really angry at this time in my life, in my process, and got a little flat in Penzance, hid away. But I used to drive to Plymouth every day to score, and we'd be hitting all the supermarkets on the way, getting the bottles of spirits, selling it to the pubs. Do you know what I mean? That would pay for my addiction for, you know, but it was like low level living, you know, to feed my addiction. Again, my addiction was off. You know, I come out of that rehab down there thinking I could drink again, thinking I could take some ecstasy. That was short lived. Within a week, I'm on the gear again. You know, within a week, I've got this girl living with me who's a heroin addict. You know, I've taken her from Plymouth down to Penzance. We kind of hit it off, and we stayed together for about a year and a half at the time. But, you know, in the end, it was really sad. You know, she was out selling herself. Do you know what I mean? I'm, you know, colluding with that behavior because I need a fix. You know, my spirit in me was dead. You know, I remember moving back to Plymouth from Penzance because it all come to an end down there after about a year. After doing that, getting a council flat down in Prince Rock, but living in kind of anxiety, and spirit was kind of broken, real rock bottom stuff, and thinking I just want to be out of this. The drugs, I was going back to drug dealers, kicking off because the drugs weren't cutting it no more. I was getting no effect. If I could hit up £50 worth of heroin, and I would get the desired effect. The kind of drugs were stopping working, and my sister, God bless her, Julie, you know, what a lovely individual she was. She kind of stepped in right at the right point, and she managed to kind of get me into treatment. She had already arranged it behind my back. She was working in Platters with a guy called Mario. He's dead now. Funny enough, he died. He was in one of my recovery houses, and he was about 9 years clean at the time, and his family, they had all the restaurants and the Barbican, they had platters, and my sister was working there, and he used to talk to my sister about where I was at, and she kind of like got the information she needed. She went into the primary treatment centre I've been in before, Broadreach House, and she got me a place there. And she come around and she kind of tricked me to staying with her the night and then getting me into the treatment unit in the morning. Really weird how it worked. So I'd abandoned the bird I was living with, who I was pouncing off. Do you know what I mean? Who I was probably making her life hell. And went with my sister, and then went into the treatment centre. And that there was a pivotal time in my life for recovery forming. For the dark days starting to be over.
That was the big switch.
Yeah, for the transparency of life then, kind of, I wanted it. I wanted this gift of recovery that I'd seen about me, that I'd experienced stint of, and I knew what I needed to do now. And I had this overwhelming ability. It was really weird, but I remember I'd done a Hazelden step 3 assignment, within this treatment unit. After a yoga lesson, I had a real touching spiritual experience. This is not everyone's experience, but this is my experience. A little bird flew down on the garden and landed on my shoulder. How does that happen? Tweeting in my ear, little bird, little robin. Spooky. And I felt all limp for about an hour, sat in this garden, like, what the bloody hell's going on here? It was beautiful. It was like a God-given experience for me in that moment. And I sat in that garden after that step 3 assignment, and I knew I had to conform and give myself. But it felt so natural now. It felt like all the wreckage in the past could be dealt with. All life's burdens could leave me. The road ahead, I could see clearly. I felt gratitude in my heart for the first time in my life. I felt some love from some people around me that I'd never experienced before. And I knew I had to work this program within this treatment centre to maintain living. And it was all based on the 12 steps. And that's what I proceeded to do. My primary treatment finished very quickly. I'd done about 6 weeks. They shipped me off to Bristol. I went to Bristol. I went to a secondary treatment unit. I was really sincere and up for recovery. I got a really good recovery-based counsellor who was in recovery himself, who I got open with and honest with about everything. Yeah. And that was the ball I was learning to kind of play, to be honest about everything now, to start being real about the deal and all the kind of stuff I've witnessed, I've seen, I've kind of done, all the resentment I was carrying, all the shame-based shit that I was carrying that I shouldn't have been carrying was kind of needed. I needed to be rid of it, and I confided in this counsellor and everything, and life started to take on a new meaning. I didn't have nothing. Do you know what I mean? I kind of was broken. I kind of remember living on like £14 a week, and then that was reduced to £8 a week because of social loans and all that kind of stuff. But I felt some kind of contentment and happiness in my life for once in my life. And it was a life that I could see that I could live without using. And I was attending religiously meetings every day. And I had some real good role models in my life. A guy called Dave Mack at the time, shout to you, Dave Mack. I know you're no longer here. God bless you, my friend. But he was all about the fellowship in Bristol at the time. It was huge. You know what I mean? The fellowship, I know I shouldn't, it's traditions and all that. You shouldn't mention fellowship and whatnot. But this 12-step fellowship at the time was very much vibrant, alive, and had lots of numbers. And I got very much involved with all that. Do you know what I mean? I should drag people from the treatment centre to come along to the meetings. I was heightened like Mr. Recovery.
Oh, yeah.
I was taking on service commitments at the biggest meetings. I was sharing at every meeting I was going. It was there. I was in tune with this stuff. And you meet some good people along the way. You meet some not so good people on the way. And it's really weird. I've got a tattoo on the back of my neck. You see on the back of my neck there?
Yep.
There's 168 initials of friends of mine who have died because of drug addiction from growing up, through my using and through recovery. And I continue to add to that.
168.
168 so far. And that's, I kind of feel like a lot of them are with me a lot of the time in my ongoing journey of recovery and living clean. And yeah, it's quite powerful. And I'm in Bristol, and you're amongst it. And Dave Mackey was like an idol at the time for me. Do you know what I mean? And
why can't you mention? Sorry to cut you, but why can't you mention other fellowships?
Well, they say about traditions, dynamics. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But predominantly, my fellowship is Narcotics Anonymous. That's kind of where but I don't really want to kind of get into traditions. I'll do whatever I need to do at any given time. I got to 20 years in my recovery, and I felt like I was spiritually dying in Plymouth. I'd kind of tell you a story here. I kind of like, I set up one of the biggest recovery setups in the city of Plymouth and revolutionized recovery in my city, back in 2011. And, with that comes a lot of melee. With that, for me, comes success. With that, you're flying high. With that, you become a target. With that, it spoils your fellowship support that you've kind of grown to love. I've had to make switches from fellowship to different fellowship to get my kind of spiritual connection kept right, to keep my batteries charged in recovery. And it can cause all kind of dynamics. You go to that fellowship, you're not you're breaking it, and I think, piss off. It's not a fucking football match. Do you know what I mean? This is like, unconditional stuff that matters to the soul of the recovering person. You shouldn't, for me anyway.
Irrelevant.
Absolutely. But a lot of people get on that, unfortunately. And so it's kind of been, but I'll tell you a bit about my experience, because this is a bit of like godly stuff, alignments. And I ended up moving after my experience in Bristol of, heightened after treatment, living up there in a dry house, I lost my mother up there when I was in Bristol. God bless my mother. My mother was, I was telling the story earlier about my father. He'd lost touch with his brother, but around that time, my mother died. She had a heart transplant, my mother, Janet, God bless her. And she had a heart transplant at 47 years of age, and she died on Valentine's Day. On Valentine's Day, with somebody else's heart. What is the chances of somebody dying with somebody else's heart on the day of the heart? That's what happened to my mother, God bless her. But that's how special she was. That's how I treat that. She was a very special human being. And but weird. And I remember I was living in the dry house. I got the news. The relationship I was in I got in an early recovery relationship. It was all messy. She ended up sleeping with someone else in the fellowship, and they were on a tobacco run together. And because Bristol at the time, because it was full of like gangsters, London, it was like a mini London, Bristol, but they were all into the tobacco. I wasn't. They would pop the piss in. Do you know what I mean? But a lot of them had built they were sustaining a really good, wealthy way of life. And I used to be really jealous and envious of all these people that were kind of securing. But they would get me to drive a car sometimes, pay me 60 quid for the day when I come out of treatment, just this little income, would help out. And kind of, that wasn't my thing. I kind of, and she ended up sleeping with someone on a tobacco run, and I was living with her in a dry house, and it slaughtered me. It was just after my mother died, and the whole combination of all that hit me like a ton of bricks, and I knew I had to move. And I had one friend at the time. He no longer speaks to me now. Weird, isn't it? How you kind of lose close friends when you kind of succeed and do well in your life. And I ended up going to Weston-super-Mare, sleeping on his sofa for a period of time. And then a friend of mine who was a big tobacco baron, Brummy Lee Bowen, God bless him, really nice fella. He started all the dry houses off in Weston-super-Mare, and I liked Lee. He was a really good character. He had a good spirit about him. And he come and picked me up from the dry house. He took me down, and then when it was time for me to get me furniture, he even come and picked me up and got my furniture, whatever bits I had, and he gave me his flat in Weston-super-Mare. God bless you, Lee. He gave me his flat in the town centre of Weston-super-Mare. I was living in the Shrubbery, homeless hostel at Christmas time, broken, absolutely in turmoil, grieving, broken relationship. My whole comfort blanket had gone, fuming that she had slept with someone else, raging that he had kind of, do you know what I mean, crossed that boundary, and I lost my mother.
Still clean.
And the days were feeling so long, but I wasn't using. I was staying clean, going to meetings, doing the right thing, connecting with the stuff, going to codependency meetings. Do you know what I mean? Embracing the whole recovery vibe that was on offer in Weston-super-Mare. And Weston-super-Mare really held me at that time in my recovery, like nothing else. And Lee Bowen really come through. He moved all my stuff down. Another friend of mine, Sheridan, his dog Murdoch, kept me going. Do you know what I mean? At the time, and God bless them people. And Roni, his missus at the time, kind of helped me through that experience. And, and I was really involved with sponsorship at the time. I had old Remy sponsored me for years. He has, good guy. He's been with me through day dot, and I've gone through the green and gold and the program with him, and, continued to do all that stuff. And, Lee Bowen moved me down to my first flat there, and, and things really started to take a turn for the better then. Do you know what I mean? It was like after the grieving process started healing, getting better through pain we grow and all that stuff. And, you know, I kind of was having a new experience in living, and I really didn't want to use. I even stopped smoking cigarettes because that was a contributing factor to my mother dying. So I quit the nicotine.
The love in you started
Yeah,
growing, and the
yeah,
care.
absolutely, absolutely. The people that I
Mm,
never used to empathise with in meetings, who were sharing shit, broken relationships,
yeah.
losing people, I can now understand and get a deeper meaning around and connect with it all a bit more. And
Compassion.
that's what I've done. And you know, I ended up securing a job back in Plymouth a couple of years later after having a good recovery experience in Western, healing from a lot of my trauma and past. I got a job for a Christian organisation. My friend was leaving, in Monterey House, and I turned this Christian hostel, homeless hostel, into a recovery house, into a dry house, implemented morning meetings, you know, one-to-one stuff, making sure people were there, changing the license agreements so that people would go to meetings, started turning it, revolving it out. These guys like Lee Bowen, a friend of mine, was like doing with his dry houses in Western. He was instrumental in getting in another guy called Judge, you know, a friend of mine. They were in the recovery field up there. They had set up dry houses previous to me. They were sharing their experience with me what to do. Even though this experience of this dry house, I was working for an organization. Yeah, the organization was a bit crooked, this one I was working for, even though it was Christian.
Okay.
The chairman, the chief executive, was called Mike Emini, but it was like Mike Enemy. That's how it
Okay.
felt come the end, because I ended up whilst I was there, you know, it was like I wanted to train as an addictions counsellor. I
Mm.
wanted to kind of, and I ended up the course. Broadreach House were running a course at the time, same as Cloud's House, but it cost £3,500. And I was kind of, I ain't got the money for that. Blah, blah, blah. So the organisation, I went to the papers, the local paper, and I gave my story.
Okay.
And I gave my story about my life as an addict and how I wanted to do it. And I brought all the funding around for everybody on the course.
Ah,
Then the organisation had stepped in and said, oh, we're paid for you, Lee. Do you know what I mean? So I
ah.
got double whammy. So I ended up training as an addictions counsellor whilst I was there, getting my placement hours at Broadreach House and at Monterey House. And I'd done loads of training in supported housing. And I was flying high with this stuff. But the thing was, when you're flying high, you got to expect to kind of hit the floor sometimes, because people will always try to shoot you down. And that's been my experience of living clean in recovery. People, you will be a target. And I remember I went to a Bournemouth convention, funny enough, and I went with this, I was seeing this young lady, and funny enough, I'm seeing her today. It's really weird. I've met her like 19, 20 years on to the same month. It's
Wow.
spooky. The one I was telling you about earlier.
Okay.
And I went to the Bournemouth convention. I come back, and this guy that I was training up, Scottish Jimmy, dogged me right up. He's a dog. What are you doing? He's made amends, yeah, which is good, yeah. But at the time, he was trained, but he had the ump, because I was living a pretty cool life. Trained as a counsellor, I had all my accommodation. I was getting good money. I was saving. You know, for me, my motto's always been, whatever I used to fucking spend on gear, I can save that. You know, and I've done very
Okay.
well in relation to that thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I bloody Scottish Jimmy and this other lady that I had a bit of an affair with, she was doing some voluntary work. She ended up giving me a massage, this Tracy, and we ended up hitting it off, and I ended up sleeping with her, and I shouldn't have. And she had the right ump with me. Yeah, and like, you know, and I went away to Bournemouth Convention. I remember it, this Vicky I just started seeing. She had the ump, that was it, because I was seeing this Vicky at the time. This Tracy went away. They both colluded, got hold of the chief executive of the Christian organisation whilst I was away, said I'd left the house in disrepair, I'd left addicts with no money for food, absolute nonsense, all of it. And but Jimmy wanted my job. So what happened was I came back and he said, oh, we've been in touch with the chairman or whatever, Mike, and I'm not allowed to let you into your accommodation. I went, fuck off, get out the way. Do you know what I mean? So I've like pushed him out of the way. He's gone and made a statement, said I threatened his life. I threatened his life, threatened to kill him on the back of all that, which I didn't. It just got a bit heated. Yeah. I ended up beating his mate up at a meeting because his mate, a big Scottish fella, God bless him, I think he's dead now, Donny, really fronted me out of a meeting, but I ended up fucking having a right fight. But I beat him up at a meeting. He was a strong bugger too. And you don't do that at meetings. That's not like the kind of thing. But he kind of attacked me at a meeting. Yeah. And so then I ended up walking away from that. I ended up taking him to a tribunal after all that because I lost my job unfairly.
Ah.
And it's really awful, the encounter, what happened there. But listen to this for a story, right? So I've gone away, I've got paid out, I had a good payout from the tribunal, they've got a few quid, they paid my accommodation, a little caravan down in Cornwall. I was away with me little sexy bird for the summer season, so it was all good in my eyes. Do you know what I mean? Lovely time. We were traveling Europe. Do you know what I mean? Flying away together, living a great time. And but I had all this resentment with this Jimmy that he'd done that after everything. I had all these professional qualifications now. I'd had my diploma in addiction counts. I've been there for years at Monterey House doing all that. And he'd taken it all from me. And because of the girl putting her input in, because she had a resentment, jealous, because I didn't want to know her after I met, after I was with, you know. And so I ended up going to Cornwall. That's another story to that too. I think I told you earlier, but anyway, that can wait. So I'm carrying on for the next 7 years, living my life, doing what I do, and you know, kind of like. And then I was in a relationship with other lady some years later, and I remember I got a phone call in like 2011 of a guy called Michael Dawson, who was a really good friend of mine at the time, and he said, "Oh, Lee, I'm here with Richard Webber." And I know these guys, the characters from back in the day, and I knew Richard had just come out. Richard's a nice guy, and you don't want to get on the wrong side of them, put it that way, two brothers. And he said, "Oh, I'm here at the Windham pub." He said, I've told him that you might, because Michael was doing some plumbing work for him. He said, I told him that you used to run dry houses and stuff like that, and you might know what. And Richard said, "Oh, do you want to come down and have a look?" He said, I'm happy to rent it out to you. So I've gone down and had a look, but, well, bearing in mind, I've just had this phone call, just got off the phone, just coming out the block of flats. All I can hear in the distance is the beeping horn. So who the bloody hell's that? Look, it's a little Fiesta. Pissing down with rain, windows wound down. Scottish Jimmy, the guy that lost me my job all them years ago at Monterey House. He's looked at me. He said, "Lee," he said, "can I just have a chat with you?" He said, "I need to make amends to you, mate, for being part of the conspiracy to get you out of Monterey House all them years ago." I thought, how ironic is that? I've just had a phone call within the hour to go and look at the first ever recovery house, dry house, to get started, which is like my organisation, and he's making amends to me. All them years I've been feeling, did I do something wrong all them years ago? I never done anything wrong. I always kind of held myself with integrity, and even though I had resentments, I'd done step 5 work around that stuff. You know what I mean? I kind of like carried myself accordingly, done the right thing. And then I thought, he don't know I've just had a phone call to go and set up the first ever recovery house. And that's what I proceeded to do. It was like a God-given moment. I looked up at the sky, when you think there's some things meant to be, and I just thought, this is meant to be. So I went with it. I went down, I met Richard, met Michael, and we set up the first Restart Recovery House, and that's been another story in itself. From 2011 for the next 13 years, that's been another story in itself, because I'll tell you exactly what happened. And Michael, he was very much involved with all that early on, and he come to Loggerheads a couple of years into it. I had a couple projects, and Michael was one of the directors with me, and it all got a bit heated between him and the Webber brothers at the time. And I remember it kind of like Michael coming and saying to me, "Oh, I've just been sat with," but and he said that he was sat with someone, and they want to get their the Dans and they want to get the Dans out of the town or something like this. Like Michael had said to me anyway, he was out having a roast dinner, and this fella had told him that they were trying to run the Dans, but Michael was married to one of the Dans, who I'd known anyway. I'd known, the family, the mother, they were friends with my family growing up, my mum and that. My father actually saved one of the Dans' father on 2 occasions from dying. He stopped him from falling off a scaffold one time, believe it or not. And he took a knife off a man that went to stab Morris. God bless Morris. He was a lovely fella, and he's passed over now. And my father, he had a lot of respect for my father, because on 2 occasions my father saved his life. But Michael had fell out like had heard this, tied into the dance. So I get it. Michael's come to me down in my office, down in the Brit one day, and said, Lee, I've got a bit of a problem. I said, well, Michael, you know what you need to do, mate? You need to call Richard up, have a meeting with him, discuss this, and get it put to bed. And Michael went, I ain't fucking doing that. We need to find some other houses away from Richard. So that's put me in a right awkward position. You know, I'm thinking, you can't get like 12, 18, I think we had a few projects at the time, but they were off Richard, the premises. So I think you can't move vulnerable people at the time. And, you know, you kind of can't just get up and move them to somewhere else. And I thought, why should I do that? Richard's a friend of mine. There's no harm come my way. I'm kind of stuck in the middle here. And then I got Richard saying, right, I need it. He's not fucking being part of this in any of my houses. So I'm stuck in the middle of this huge confrontation. It's kicking right off in the city with the Webbers, with the Dan. Oh, it was fucking mayhem. And I'm thinking, I don't want to be part of this. This is not my journey. But I realized that it was part of my journey at the time. And, you know, I kind of stuck with it. And, you know, Michael, for whatever reason, he stood down, you know, as a director because it was the right thing to do at the time. And I kind of led the way with the organization really at that pivotal time. You know, I took the reins over and I was very much in the mix of it anyway. I was there every morning taking groups. Do you know what I mean? I was there opening the doors up. I was there kind of, you know, welcoming the new guys into that, you know, and Michael was into the, you know, big time into recovery back then. And, you know, he was very good with individuals, and Michael really helped me so much in my early recovery. And he was someone that I used with and was a very close friend of mine growing up. But that is no longer existing. He doesn't even speak to me today, and for whatever reason, do you know what I mean? But that's the truth behind the story. And I've taken my inventory around all that, and I've looked and I thought, I've done nothing wrong in all this. Do you know what I mean? Except carry myself accordingly, unfortunately. And I've been kind of labelled and dogged for every move.
How's it been growing that business?
It become a huge success, guys. It become a huge success. You know, I started taking over all the pubs off the Webbers. They owned quite a few pubs in the store. I didn't realise they owned all of them at one time. And because they were getting good rents off me, leasing them off me from my company, they were giving me lots more. So we're getting them done up, getting it filled. And, you know, what I created with Restart Recovery was a safe haven for addicts to find recovery in the city of Plymouth. And all this was going on in an area that I'd used in, that I grew up in, that I'd been in rock bottom in. You know, I'd been a chronic speed freak for there. I've been nicking plants outside people's houses and selling them to speed dealers. I'd be going into speed dealers' houses in Stonehouse with full chippy clothes on and then fucking coming out in boxer shorts. Do you know what I mean? You know, because I'd sold all my clothes for speed.
Wow.
And, you know, and then I'm doing something really vibrant in the community and setting up all these. I took over the Britannia pub. The Britannia was a notorious pub. It was one time, it was a speed, it was caught in late, it was a speed factory. They were making speed in there. They were making amphetamine in there. All the, like, you know, the kingpins or whatever, they were doing their thing in there. And I ended up taking all these rundown pubs after they were done up and kind of getting them renovated and tied up, getting them furnished and making them real safe spaces, stage 1 houses for people to come in to detox in. Do you know what I mean? As long as they were scripted, working with the local agency, we could do that. And, you know, I created a license agreement. I got loads of help around all this stuff. And, you know, and I set up an empire of recovery in the city of Plymouth within a very short period of time. And it was it's a charitable company. It's kind of, you know, it's for the benefit of the community to help others. Do you know what I mean? And specifically though for homeless people.
Oh, okay.
Specifically for homeless people who've had substance misuse issues. And it transpired, if I'm honest, I got to a place where in the city of Plymouth, I was up to about 150 beds in the city. You know, can you imagine me sat in, I think it was about 25 premises at one time. But then I started taking leaseholds off lots of different landlords, really cheap rates. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, you charge your housing benefit for what you're delivering, and, you know, you get the higher rate housing and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I didn't rely on outside funding. I relied purely on housing benefit to secure a pay staff and keep the motions in the range running on all it. Do you know what I mean? And pay myself a wage, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it worked out beautifully at the time and whatnot. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, the blessing of it all is, you know, I went in partnership with Plymouth Access to Housing many years ago. You know, Plymouth Access to Housing is called PATH. And they house all the, you know, refugees, whatever, homeless. They're predominantly homeless. And, you know, they tied in a contract with me for years, and they really transpired. they're really big in the city these days. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, I kind of like, I got to a place, you know, after about 13 years of, you know, it imploding, you know, recover, you know, part of my deal was to introduce everybody to the world of recovery that I've been introduced to. Whatever way you do that, because I used to get some stick for breaking, saying I'm breaking to jizz. I'll be setting up meetings in some of my pub lounges. Do you know what I mean? Getting people in, and you know, I'll be housing people that no one would house. I have had some dynamics that you would not believe. I've had houses petrol bombed. Yeah, with like I'm dealing with people with mental health. Yeah, I've had houses petrol bombed that I haven't been able to do anything about because these people have been vulnerable. They've been in my residence, but they've been asked to leave because they're nuts. Do you know what I mean? And you know, and they've come back. They've petrol. I've had people booby trap houses. You know, you get a lot of addicts who got resentment of booby trap houses with dirty needles. Do you know what I mean? So when you're getting the rooms clean, you've got to be wearing gloves specific. I've had people, you know, wire up rooms in. Just absolute cat where they've lost it completely. And but I've had some beautiful experience where I sit in 12-step meetings these days, and I see so many individuals who have been through them projects over the years, leading and maintaining successful lives. Professional people, they don't shout about it that they've been through my projects. Do you know what I mean? They don't talk about that their early stint and how I've kind of got them in. Do you know what I mean? To get them in the embrace, to get the format of recovery going, introducing them to me is because my whole philosophy and belief is introduce them to 12-step movements. Whether they get it or not is another thing, but that's God-given work.
Give them the option.
Absolutely, and that's what I've always believed in, and I've been in a beautiful position to be able to do that. And you know, it's like it's helped me. It's helped so many people in so many ways.
Saved your life.
Yeah, absolutely,
Saved your life.
And you know, Restart still, you know, it exists today, but on a much smaller level. When COVID hit, I kind of wound it down a lot, got rid of a lot of the leasehold properties, and I work very closely with a couple of agencies today. Do you know what I mean? Housing homeless people, all that kind of stuff, and you know, just kind of keep it real simple, but you know, still flying high with it, really, Gaz. Do you know what I mean? And you know, it's kind of like it's been a bloody journey, mate, to get where I am today, Gaz.
I was just going to say a journey and a half, but it's more than a journey and a half. Wow. Share with me and the world, what's it like when you see someone go through the struggles like how you did and that change their lives?
That was fantastic. There's nothing more warming to the heart than seeing people you think, do you know what I mean? You know, that you think ain't going to get it, that have completely transformed it, and you've been part of that process. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, that's a really rewarding experience. And, you know, if I can go on in my life to help another human being to achieve that, you know, that makes recovery all worth living for. You know, I kind of sponsor individuals in the program these days. I kind of still do my bit, of course, man. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, it's like, I have lost so many people through drugs. You know, I've lost so many people over the last few years more so, you know, who've decided, you know, that the program is not for them, that they're going to use again. And within a very short period of time, they've perished and they've died.
Just on an estimation, how many people's lives do you feel that you've saved of?
Well, to be fair with you, Gaz, yeah, it's like God works in mysterious ways. I've helped organizations set up through my template and my framework throughout the country. I've got lots of people in recovery who have come to me to ask me how I've done it, how I achieved it. I've given them all my kind of information because that's the bigger picture of it all. There's many organizations that are set up these days in Plymouth as a direct result of Restart Recovery. Do you know what I mean? Of my kind of organization. I've gone on to help masses of people in different setups that don't even know through what I've done, because I was one of the early starters of all that stuff down in the southwest. There was nothing when I started.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? Now these days there's plenty. You know, Restart is not needed a great deal. This is still needed, but in a different kind of level.
Yeah, and you're the ideal candidate to be the head runner, aren't you? Because you've gone through it all and more.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, it's like when my mother died and I was 18 months clean, I put the key tag in her incinerator, you know, and, you know, I kind of just asked her to give her, you know, my blessing in recovery. And it feels like the blessing has always remained. You know, I must say, my father, he died. I bloody feel terrible now, I forget. You know, my father died, you know, about 4 years ago at the beginning of COVID. He kind of died of COVID. And, you know, my father was a bastard growing up. He was evil in lots of ways. My younger brothers and sisters didn't see a lot of that stuff, yeah? My brother Tommy, little legend Tommy, face of Plymouth, do you know what I mean? He was like, don't tell the bride, got married on the series, don't tell the right, good looking bugger Tommy, do you know what I mean? And, you know, I'm proud to be his brother. And my other brother Chrissy, he's just doing a thing now. He's fiery around Drake's Island, this island down where we live. But my father was very much that way inclined. I'll show you a video later of his theory around Drake's Island. It blew your mind, honestly.
Okay.
And my other sister Lauren, she like raises kids and whatnot. My other sister Julie lives in Australia. But Tommy, Lauren weren't really exposed to a lot of the stuff that me and my sister Julie were. Do you know what I mean? You know, I guess my folks made the best of a bad situation. But to be fair, it wasn't good enough. You know, it was like it's installed a lot of fear and shit into me that I shouldn't have had. But my father died, God bless him. And my mother, when she died, she said to me, son, if there's one thing, because she always stayed with my father, I can never get my head around why. I found out some details later why she did. But I won't go into that, it's not fair. And as your father grows old in their frailty, no matter what they've done, you find unconditional love. Yeah, this program has taught me to love rather than hate. This program has taught me to care when I wouldn't care. This program has taught me a bit of respect when I've had no respect. Do you know what I mean? And I was able to build a relationship with my father for the latter parts of his years, where I was there for him. Do you know what I mean? Where you see them getting vulnerable in their older ages, you can still be there despite all the kind of shit that's gone on in one's life. And that's a direct result of living the program, in my experience. And that's the kind of human traits I want to carry. You know, I have a beautiful daughter today. She's 21 years. I'm a granddad. Became a granddad. Little nice. Dolly G at Christmas. You know, I had Alicia's 21. I had a fucking nightmare when she was born, honestly, but all worth it in the end. You know, and you know, I would have missed it for the world, but I nearly missed it. That time in Derford Hospital in 1995, guys, when I gave up on my life, and the powers that be decided it wasn't. And there's so many things that have aligned throughout my journey recovery experience that is beyond me. I remember my first intervention, right? When I went to Bullreach House all them years ago, I ended up going to they wanted us to go down to this church. I'm not religious. I'm not a religious person. But I've ended up going along to this little congregation hall over in Bickley, not Bickley, just a little bit further up from the troops. And I've gone in, I've met this beautiful old spiritualist woman called Irene. God bless her, because she won't be alive now. I'll be very surprised if she is, because she was about 90 at the time. But she cornered me in this like church building. They're having the ceremony and, you know, their service there. And she's gone, Lee, I've been waiting for you. It's weird, weird. I'm like, what? But she felt my hand, and I could feel some force of like love from her eyes that I'd not felt before. And it really felt healing, their spirit on me, and it, beautiful. And she gave me this little card. And this little card I have read as my step-free prayer every day. Not religious, but I say a prayer every day. And that little card has been implemented in my step-free prayer daily from this little old woman I read.
Can you share
and then
with us?
I've looked up at the pastor who's taking the congregation in this little church hall. It's only my old pharmacist who used to give me my methadone every day and my Valium every day, welcoming me into his church hall. I got a bit spooked out by it, so I only went a couple more times, but yeah.
What was on the card? What was the words on the card?
Well, it was just like, you know, in all I do today, please remind me that there is just one way to do the things that I know best, to put my mind, my heart at rest, and that's to put in your hands, God's hands, the kind of plan. Do you know what I mean? And it's that kind of stuff. I say that, and that little card was from that little old lady all them years ago. Real blessings. But I couldn't see him. Do you know what I mean? It's like God works in mysterious ways, guys. And I'm not religious.
I remember you saying the story as well when someone said, someone jumped back and gave you another palm reading.
Man, listen to this. I was in jail in Cyprus, and I got really friendly, you know, Iranian guy, lovely, Sammy he was called. And they're really humble human beings, Iranians. I really like them. And the ones I've met anyway. And he was reading people's palms. So I went along and got I'll have a go at that, get my palm read. And he's reading me palm and he's telling me everything that's come right now. But he's jumped back. And I'm like, whoa, what's the matter? It's like my hand was on fire. Or you know what I mean? He's oh. Well, he said, Lee, jealousy. So bad for you. So bad everywhere. I went, why? I ain't got nothing. I'm in prison, rotting away in a foreign prison. He went, drugs. So me, being me, I'm thinking, oh, I must be going to be a kingpin drug dealer when I get back to the city. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking. I said, what, drug dealer? He went, no, something different. Not drug deal, something different, but to do with drugs. And I've really come to understand through my course of recovery what this man Sammy was talking about all them years ago in the prison with green-eyed monsters when you're flying high. Do you know what I mean? Are you a target? You know, I've been investigated to the max, my company, all that. People saying, oh, I've had it all. Honestly, you would not believe the kind of trials and tribulations I've had to go through to maintain living clean and keep my head above water and show people that I live legitly. Do you know what I mean? You know, but that's my story, Gaz. That's the kind of, you know what I mean? That's the road I'm on, and that's how I kind of live today. And
massive
you know, I
credit.
hope I haven't kind of like put people's name. If I have, forgive me. It's just expression, words. I express myself, but you know, I feel really fortunate to be here.
I feel that as
blessed
well.
with the life I've been granted. And recently, you heard about my friend Lou over here. Good friend of mine, Lou Bartlett. You know, God bless you, Lou. I found Lou dead beginning of February out here in Thailand.
And sorry to cut you, but he was one of my close friends as well. I knew him from the gym, and I actually invited him here, like as my second guest after Eddie Murphy, the first episode. And he says, "Yeah, guys, I'll do it. Give me some time. He says, "Give me a month. He says, "Okay." I messaged him a few weeks after, maybe a month after. Didn't hear nothing. And I thought, oh, he's just not interested. And then, so I take from that, do your best. If you have something on your mind to do it as soon as possible. Don't do it next week or the month after. Don't just put urgency. Add urgency into your life with everything, because you might not know. You might not have the chance to do it. So, so yeah, I'm glad to have his great friend here to fill in for him.
Yeah, cool, man. Good soul, Lou.
Great soul. One of the sweetest guys I've ever met. Yes. So if you don't, we'll touch on it. If you don't mind. Lou was using performance enhancing drugs. He went to the dentist. You said he had irregular heartbeat a few days before he went to the dentist. And you did say to him, just be careful with the steroid use and that. Obviously, you can't say, that was it.
No, I didn't know.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying, but
in know about steroid use.
Yeah.
Until the police opened up the safe and it was full of it.
Yeah.
Which is a really sad factor in something when we don't know that's caused the clot.
Yeah, but we're just putting it out there. We're just giving you
listen, man, if you're in recovery, living conducively on the recovery level, steroids is a no-no. Anything that's going to enhance your mood, you've got to come down. You've got to avoid that stuff, people. Do you know what I mean? As much as we want to look good, feel good, do it the real way if you're in recovery. Do you know what I mean? We want to stay in recovery because, moody steroids, look at the moody Valium, how many people they kill. Look at the moody fucking drugs that get imported that kill people, yeah? It's the same with steroids. Be careful, people.
And I don't feel like we'd be doing Lou's life justice if we have information that we don't share with people.
Absolutely.
And do you know what I mean? So yeah, we're here to share the information
and
that's going to help you.
He was a long-time recovery member, Lou. This is what happens when you come to Thailand. You end up sipping these bloody...
So we're coming to the end shortly, but what's been going through my mind is, can you give us some sort of timeline through the first time you had your first mind-altering drug, okay, to where you are now?
Well, I'm 52 years old now.
Yeah.
And I started using when I was 16.
16.
And
so
I'm nearly 27 years clean now. Abstinent.
So the speed was the first one.
Speed.
Yeah. And then after a few years,
heroin kind of factor.
Yeah.
But I was only a heroin addict for a few years. You know what I mean? The latter part of my relapses, it was heroin use. That was chronic.
Oh, okay.
You know, but before that, I was severely burnt out through amphetamine use. It almost feels like when I found heroin, it was a relief.
Oh,
I used to have people on the gear saying to me, "What are you doing?" Because I'd be banging up speed,
oh,
swallowing methadone, Valium, you know what I mean, concocted with heroin
yeah.
after. It's like, people say, "What are you doing?" How I'm sat here with my sanity, Gaz,
Mm,
and my wits about me is beyond me. Do you know what I mean? For the shit that
yes.
I've pumped in my
Yeah,
system
yeah,
over the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
years. You know, I try and take care of myself, guys. Believe it
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not, this t-shirt don't really do me justice because, but I take care. I run every other day.
Mm,
I do all the cold water swimming when I'm at home. Do you know what I mean? I live a very kind of vibrant, healthy way of life. I don't smoke no more.
mm,
You know, I kind of live the deal as best as
mm.
I can.
What advice would you have someone that is going through what you went through back those years?
Well, the advice is when you've had enough, there's plenty of organisations out there that will help you
Mm,
when you've had enough. But you
mm.
need to ask for help.
And
You
you
got,
need to have that feeling, what you've just
of
said. You need
course,
to
man.
have that, right, I've had enough.
Yeah. You know, windows of opportunity can be few and far between, but when one comes along, open it, reach out, ask for some help. Face the pride. Do you know what I mean? Fuck the pride. You know,
Mm,
I've just lost a really good friend also a couple of weeks ago. You know, he was so handy with his hands. He kind of built a place that I own. He kind of, he finished it off, and, you know, he kind of was multi-skilled, good looking. He was the best break dancer in Plymouth when I was a kid. He could have been signed up for movies and all, and I'm not joking, yeah? And he perished and died in one of my properties because he couldn't stop. He was ill. He was ill. Went into treatment last year. Do you know what I mean? Had a detox, wouldn't stay with the recovery program, you know, and the body will only take so much until it will not take any more. And, you know, when you see people die in them circumstances, and then you see other people die in natural circumstances in recovery, do you know what I mean? It just like, you know, is a massive kind of gap in sadness. You know, I go to so many funerals these days, and you know what really saddens me? When it's like addicts' funerals that have never had any chance of like recovery or life, and that huge gap of life is missing in what people want to say about them because they've just been so caught up in active addiction.
mm, mm. Thank you for sharing. We do normally finish with a meditation. Do you meditate?
I sit quietly often.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Okay. So let's just have a few moments of silence. Okay. I normally do a guided meditation, but let's just sit here in silence and just give thanks and gratitude that we are living here and now, and with all the things that we've gone through, just appreciate being here. And coming back to here and now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are alive. Please make the most out of your life. Thank you for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please let me know in the comment section. Hit the share button. If you feel that this content is valuable to the people you care about. Big thank you to Lee for being here and sharing all of his heart with us, all of his rock bottom moments, and how he's risen from it. Give thanks. It's really appreciated, Lee. And I'm confident and certain that you coming here today, sharing your heart and wisdom will help others. Thank you. If you would like to support the podcast, you can go over to the link and support over on Buy Me a Coffee. But the main thing I ask you is just to enjoy the content and hit the share button and let me know what really resonated with you. Yes. So yeah, thank you once again, Lee.
Yeah, cool, guys.
Absolute
Been a pleasure, mate.
pleasure.
Been a pleasure.
Much
Lovely.
love. Great
man.
man. Absolutely great man. Tragic to magic. Any final words?
I remember, right, when I come out that stint in Cyprus prison, yeah, I went back to the primary treatment centre at a reunion. I was at the secondary farm place down in Cornwall.
Yeah.
I went back to a reunion. They started calling me Lazarus when I arrived at this Broadreach reunion because somebody had announced in the group that they'd seen me being carried at my mother's house dead in an ambulance in a stretcher. So they all announced, they told everyone in the recovery for eternity I was dead. And there's me, I was in prison in Cyprus, almost bloody dead, but I turned up at the reunion alive and well. So they call me Lazarus. So it's got a bit of a Lazarus story to this one, Gaz.
Excellent. Thank you again for sharing all those epic and deeply touching stories. Appreciated. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Much love. See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Peace.